Just checking out the mic. Oh, it's gap.
Oh, maybe I'll use this one. Yeah, maybe I'll use this one. Hello? From the river to the sea! 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 Palestinians have! Oh, good. That's good too. Repeat after me. Palestinians have. Palestinians have! The right to live in freedom! Palestinians have the right to return home. Now we're going to do it. Palestinians have the right to live in freedom. Palestinians have the right to return home. Let Gaza live. Let Gaza live. Let Gaza live! Let Gaza live! Not in our name! Not in our name! Not in our name! Okay, this side we're going to say not in our name. This side we're going to say not on our dime, okay? So this side we're going to go ahead. Go ahead. Not in our name! Not on our dime! That's right. Free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. Okay, I'm going to say happy, you say Mother's Day. Happy. Happy. Happy! Happy! I'm going to say no more bombs. You say no more war. No more bomb. No more bomb. No more bomb. No more bomb. Ceasefire's what we're fighting for. Freedom's what we're fighting for. Freedom's what we're fighting for. Freedom's what we're fighting for. Give yourselves a big round of applause. We're so happy you're here. I'm going to call up Rachel Valinsky to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Rachel Valinsky. I'm the artistic director at Wendy Subway. Wendy Subway is a reading room, writing space, and independent publisher in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And in August, we had the honor to publish Questions to Ask Before Your Bat Mitzvah, co-edited with Morgan Bassichis, Jay Saper, and myself. And the book is an important gathering of over 38 Jewish and Palestinian artists, scholars, activists, rabbis, who offer in the most accessible and generous way reflections in response to 36 questions to help anyone who picks up the book feel grounded in and learn about the Jewish radical tradition, unlearn Zionism, and deepen their solidarity with Palestinians. Through their commentary, the contributors to the book encourage us to ask questions with humility and courage and help us to imagine a world in which liberation is a collective and principled reality we can work toward and see realized in our lifetimes. In this book, we look to a long lineage of Jewish traditions that center action for social justice. And as so many contributors to this book repeat again and again, that call to action, whether coming from Jews or not, requires us to ask the questions about how we can learn from and continue to build on the histories and present-day struggles for social justice and Palestinian liberation. How can we reclaim historical modes of being and living together that are constantly being rescripted as division and antagonism? Today, in the 7th month of an unfolding genocide, is not only urgent to heed this call, it's imperative. We're so happy that you're all here for really the first full reading of this book. We've had a few smaller readings, but we're just really thrilled to be able to welcome so many contributors to the book here today, many of whom are present, but also many of whom shared and are coming to this space with us through pre-recorded readings. And also many friends are also filling in for others who can't be here with us. I encourage you to grab a program if you haven't already to see what's in store, and also to purchase a book or flip through the book in the back of the room over there. I'm going to just take a moment while I'm up here to reiterate some instructions for our readers and also let you know what will happen today. We're going to read through the book from beginning to end. Readers will come up and introduce themselves. They'll ask the question that they wrote to, and then they will read the question. And we'll also have some videos from people who pre-recorded. This is a marathon reading. You're encouraged to really get comfortable, come and go as you wish. There's food and drink in the back. We also invite you to please keep your masks on and keep each other safe. We have bathrooms down the hall that are accessible on either side. Unfortunately, today we were supposed to have live ASL interpreters, but because it's Mother's Day, everyone's very busy, so we were not able to secure that. But we are live streaming this program, and we will have captions on the live stream as it's archived. We're also fundraising for the Palestinian youth movement today, and you can find information about how to donate to them on the back of your program. And before I hand it over to Nicole Eisenman, who made the incredible illustrations that are in this book, I want to just offer some thanks to everyone at the Poetry Project, to Laura, to Anna, to Roberto, and everyone who has made this program possible and who's volunteering also today. I want to thank Jenny Romaine and the Great Small Works and the Whirling Imaginarium for the spoons and banners that are here throughout the space, JVP for the Let Gaza Live banner, and Hope in the artwork from Occupation to Liberation quilts. We also have air purifiers throughout the space today from Air NYC, which is a new lending library for air purifiers in the city. We have food by Mamoon, and another big thanks that I want to offer is to Tiffany Malakooti, who designed the book, who's not reading today, but who is here and who made this incredible object. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a couple of words about illustrating this book. I was so honored to be asked to do it and excited and a little terrified because I'm a painter, I'm not an illustrator, and I'm really thankful to be a painter and not an illustrator because illustration is really hard. You have to be very disciplined. You have to be able to do the same thing in different iterations over and over, which I'm really not good at, but I did it. Tiffany Malakooti, it was her idea to take the idea of questioning and questions and turn that into a character. So that became Questy, the question mark, who you'll find on every page of the book, enacting in some way what the question is on that page. So a really fun project to be involved with. Thank you all. Thank you.
My name is Angela Davis. Foreword. What a brilliant project. One that incorporates and amplifies the insistence on asking questions, a foundational Jewish value from which we all, regardless of religion or culture, can benefit. It is an honor to have been asked to contribute to this volume, which encourages Jewish teens to ask probing questions about a broad range of issues before their B'nai Mitzvahs. This guidebook, edited by Morgan Bassichis, Jay Saper, and Rachel Valinsky, provides excellent examples of deep questioning, critical engagement, and the embracing of Judaism as an ongoing call for social justice. During my high school and college years, I was happily exposed, without necessarily apprehending the full impact at the time, to Jewish secular culture. I had moved from Birmingham, Alabama to New York City to attend high school, and I ended up feeling more or less at home moving from a Southern all-Black cultural setting to a Northern, largely white, and at school majority Jewish environment because of similar cultural imperatives in my own upbringing, especially with respect to study, education more broadly, and transformative social activism. After high school, I went on to attend Brandeis University for college. As a young person, I was deeply influenced by two Jewish mentors, Herbert Marcuse and Dorothy Healy, who helped to shape both my intellectual development and my approach to political organizing. The very first time I heard the philosopher Herbert Marcuse speak at Brandeis, I knew he was the person with whom I wanted to study. A critical theorist and Marxist in the tradition of the Frankfurt School, most of whose members were Jewish, Marcuse was not religious and was most inclined to define himself as a Jew when Jews were unjustly attacked. He most identified with the emphasis in Jewish tradition on the struggle for justice and the imperative to contribute to the betterment of the world. Even as Marcuse believed, especially in the years following World War II and the Holocaust, which forced him, his family, and colleagues to immigrate to the US, that Jews needed a refuge and security that could protect them from the violence of anti-Semitism. He was also highly critical of the state of Israel for its aggressive and brutal treatment of Palestinians and other Arabs. In a statement released after his death, Marcuse's son and his wife wrote that the aspect of the Jewish tradition with which Herbert most strongly identified is the importance it places on the struggle for justice in this life, in this world. Its insistence on the ongoing effort to use my life to help bring about a better life. Later, my decision to join the Communist Party was not only related to the mentorship provided by Charlene Mitchell, the first Black woman presidential candidate, who also organized the vast international campaign that fought for my freedom when I was in jail, but also Dorothy Healy, who taught me invaluable lessons about the importance of organizing and the meaning of leadership. The daughter of Hungarian Jewish immigrants, Dorothy had joined the Young Communist League in 1928 when she was 14. She was the chair of the Southern California district of the CPUSA when I joined the party. I evoke Dorothy Healy in this foreword to a book about questions to be posed by Jewish teens in relation to their B'nai Mitzvahs, because her insistence on egalitarian, intergenerational relationships has remained with me all these years. If it is important for those who are older to mentor young people, it is equally important for all of us to recognize that young people are the future, that their questions, your questions, will determine the trajectory of a future defined by justice in Palestine and the decline of Zionism, as well as the racism that nourishes it. This will contribute to a better world for us all. I will never forget this phenomenal revolutionary woman who not only took our questions seriously, but helped us to recognize the extent to which questions matter, especially questions from those who are at the beginning of their lives and want to use their time here to help bring about a better life for all. As you participate in this rite of passage as a Jewish team, I applaud you for your commitment to asking and seeking the answers to challenging questions. And I look forward to the changes that will come about because of your insistence on doing your part to repair the world. Mazel tov.
So, you're having a Bat Mitzvah, or a B'nai Mitzvah, or a B Mitzvah, or a They Mitzvah, or whatever new word you just invented right now. Mazel tov. You must have so many feelings and so many questions. I am neither a psychiatrist nor a rabbi, so I am not certified in either feelings or questions. But I've always had a lot of both. Way back in the last century when I had my bar mitzvah, before your generation pulverized the gender binary, thank you very much for doing that, I was riddled with questions. Will anybody come? Do I have food in my braces? How do I walk less, how do you say, gay? Why did God make my sister the hot one? How many lava lamps will I get at my bar mitzvah? I've always felt like B'nai Mitzvahs were a little cruel, maybe even a sort of hazing. Why make a 13-year-old try to keep up with, make a 13-year-old stand in front of everyone they know in a suit or a dress? Why make a family try to keep up with other people's flashy displays of wealth? Or maybe I just always felt a little awkward at parties. We'll never know. The truth is, B'nai Mitzvahs have long been a source of debate, even, and not just when misogynists got mad that young women demanded to chant Torah too. In 1966, Orthodox Rabbi David Stavsky in Columbus, Ohio, called to abolish bar mitzvahs altogether. He said, "What people do not realize is that bar mitzvah is a myth. There is nothing sacred or ritualistic about a young boy memorizing a chapter in prophets and reciting a canned speech or prayer." Clearly, this rabbi has not seen one of your generation's B'nai Mitzvahs. Clearly, he had not seen how your generation is reclaiming this ritual and asking big questions about climate change, white supremacy, consent, mental health, identity, and more. Nothing is off limits. You are showing the rest of us what it means to be a Jewish adult. The B'nai Mitzvah is a rite of passage that our ancestors carved out for us to redefine what it means to come of age as a Jewish person in today's world. Every community has rites of passage. Some they choose, and some they don't. By the time they turn 13, most Palestinian kids have witnessed someone they know, if not themselves, get arrested, harassed, or killed by the Israeli occupation forces? How come Jewish kids and Palestinian kids turn 13 in such different realities, both here and in Palestine? Growing up in my Boston suburb, I never understood why. My parents would say, "It's complicated." Anyone heard that before? Friends would say, "You can't really understand until you visit." Questioning Israel or speaking up for Palestinian rights seemed like a big taboo, even bigger than being queer. In Jewish tradition, questions are sacred. We're encouraged to ask. We're encouraged to doubt. So, it shouldn't be off limits to ask why Israel drops American-made bombs on Palestinians in Gaza. Why Israel builds big walls separating one Palestinian family from another in the West Bank, demolishes Palestinian homes in Silwan and olive groves in Salfit, and forces Palestinians to spend hours waiting at the Kalandia checkpoint just to get to school or work. It shouldn't be off limits to ask why this is being funded by the US government and done in our name as Jews. No, it's not too complicated for us to learn about. All we need are some wise teachers or Bat Mitzvah tutors who care about justice and care about us at the same time. So, we invited some of our favorite artists, activists, writers, and rabbis to wrestle with questions about Israel and Palestine that you've maybe always wondered, but perhaps have been told you shouldn't ask. We are writing this book directly to you, young people, in the way we wish people had spoken directly to us. The writers in this book have many different identities and believe many different things, but we all share this common belief: everyone deserves to be free. Everyone. That's right. Including Palestinians. We believe that being Jewish and supporting Palestinian freedom go together as naturally as latkes and applesauce. This is why we call ourselves anti-Zionists. Zionists believe that whatever violence is necessary to achieve a Jewish state with a Jewish majority on a land where Palestinians have been living and farming for millennia is justified, but we say no. Even though Zionism claims to speak for all Jews and appropriates the symbols and the holidays of Judaism, Zionism and Judaism are not the same thing. Judaism is a diverse and diasporic religion and culture that spans thousands of years and many continents. Zionism is merely a European macho movement barely older than my grandma. In fact, Zionism only got off the ground when taken up by anti-Semitic British officials salivating at a chance to expand their empire and send Europe's Jews elsewhere. Today, the vast majority of the world's Zionists are not Jewish, they are Christian. But Zionism uses the Jewish community as its moral cover. We say, not in our name. So Palestinians have always resisted Zionism, as the Palestinian contributors to this book describe through their stories and their symbols of this steadfast defiance. And there have always been Jews who oppose Zionism too. The writers in this collection, who are Mizrahi, Sephardi, Ashkenazi, and Jews by choice, are part of a powerful legacy of Jews who chose and choose again and again, in the words of our contributor Esther Farmer, justice, not just us. This book is our gift to you, an invitation to join a Jewish community ready to embrace you with open arms. We hope it will support you as you navigate the choppy waters of being 13 or whatever age you are. We hope you will come up with your own questions and offer your own commentary and pass those on to the generation that comes next. But more importantly, what are you going to wear?
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, my name is Gregg Bordowitz, and I was given the honor of receiving this question. Why do Jews love questions? How can you not love a question? It's in the liturgy. Why are you looking at me is the question that God asks Moses when the Israelites are facing the Sea of Reeds in Exodus. Why are you looking to me? God asks Moses. Tell the people to go forward. As a young, queer, Jewish AIDS activist, I found inspiration in the story of Moses plunging into that sea. It taught me divine intervention requires human action. That's actually the rabbi's commentary on that section. Divine intervention requires human action. We can't always just wait. We have to question. We have to do. That, I gleaned from the rabbis in their commentary, is the fundamental principle of Jewish liberation theology. So, in the late 1980s, my friend Alexis Danzig and I, both members of the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, ACT UP, started leading queer Passover Seders to affirm the role of human action. The first gathering was small. In 3 years' time, our ACT UP Seder filled a communal Tribeca loft. Jews and non-Jews alike sat together, poring over the pages of our Xerox Tagada, questioning the role of human actions. As people living with AIDS and those who love and support us, we wouldn't wait for a cure. As activists, we understood that our lives depended on the hard work of human action. At Seders today, I'm still asking questions. Now, for me, it's urgent to ask, how do activists go further? How do we endure in the face of all that seeks to defeat us? Was the journey from slavery to freedom about conquering land? How did land possession become more important in our stories than the journey to freedom itself? Questions about Bible stories enliven interpretations. The study of religious texts is a respected aspect of Jewish culture among many diverse and interwoven histories of Jews all over the world, from ancient times until the present. And while Jews don't have a special claim on questions, we have a centuries-long practice of filling books with commentaries, interpretations, and questions after questions after questions. In Jewish tradition, the question is more important than any single answer. The question has priority over the answer. The form of the question is raised to the level of an art. How do you ask a question? What do you seek to know? Curiosity is more urgent than a resolution. All cannot be fully explained in a single answer. We ask questions and are open to answers that we may not want to hear. We're open to changing our minds. More importantly, we ask questions to produce more questions. A better question is often the best answer. In the Jewish tradition, asking a question is a craft, like poetry or pottery. So go ahead, ask sincerely about something that you genuinely do not already know. Invite your knowledge to change. There's a lot of love in questions. Yes, love. It's not about being smart. It's about not knowing. It's about being humble. Got it? Ready to turn the page? Ready to ask another question?
Hi,
Hi, everybody. My name's Marian, and I'm reading here on behalf of Rabbi Miriam Grossman. What even is a bat mitzvah? A century ago, Judith Kaplan Einstein wanted to be welcomed into the covenant as a Jewish adult and didn't see why gender should stop her. So in 1922, her father, Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, officiated the first bat mitzvah ceremony, expanding the possibilities of the ritual forever. Burials and other life cycle events can be found in our ancient Torah, but the bar mitzvah only became a distinct ritual in the most recent medieval period. In the Talmud, the ancient rabbinic compilation of Jewish oral traditions and debates, the term bar mitzvah meant a boy's age and his legal status as an adult. You turn 13 and bam, you are a bar mitzvah, a son of the commandments responsible for your own wrongdoings. The bat mitzvah has remade the bar mitzvah. As more and more girls entered ritual space, they left a mark. Communities got creative, reinventing tradition. The bat mitzvah gave way to the B'nai Mitzvah, or B mitzvah, the same coming of age ritual, but renamed without the gendered language. Becoming a child of the covenant, chanting ancient words and leading prayer in Jewish community means having the chance to connect to something bigger than oneself. You get to experience the power of being affirmed in front of your entire spiritual community for the wisdom you bring, and are reminded that there is always somewhere to turn. You never have to find your way alone. In our congregation, we invite up the B'nai Mitzvah's whole family, broadly defined, to surround the Torah. Once they are gathered, I ask them all to take a look at each other and offer the following blessing. May you learn from one another in this family. May you each commit to learning from someone who is younger than you, no matter how old you are. May you each commit to learning from someone older than you, even if that means turning to your ancestors and the ones who have come before. May you be a blessing to one another, and may this circle of family and community, learning and blessing, expand further and further in the years to come. When a B'nai Mitzvah student puts on the talis for the first time, I invite the whole community to hold on to the tzitzit fringes of the shawl as they say the Shema. We gather our tzitzit in our fingers, a beautiful, messy, jumbled up reminder that we are all bound to each other. A bat mitzvah is a day to say, it's about me. And it's also a day to say, it's not about me. Today, we affirm the power of one young person's voice. We see you. We value your Torah, your teachings, and the chance to learn from you. And we affirm that today is not just about you. It's about the power of being bound up in a tradition that is bigger than any one person. Today is also a reminder that you are not alone and never will be. You have community, and what's more, you have ancestors behind you and with you always.
I'm queer, non-binary, secular, old, not even Jewish. Are bat mitzvahs for me? How could they not be? Just as we claim our multiple identities, for me, Black, white, queer, artist, non-binary, abolitionist, secular Jew, atheist, and disabled, we must also claim the many ways we arrive to ritual, markers of time, tradition, and yes, our bat mitzvahs. We are reinventors of time, constantly arriving and shaping our futures. We shine as ourselves in ways that are becoming, growing, and expanding. Just as we feel fully us when we embrace all our layers, let's hold those tight and say, yes, this bat mitzvah is for me. Yes, I don't want to call it a bat mitzvah, but rather a bas mitzvah, or a mikvah, or a let's make a new name while we're at it. Yes, this new name is for me. Yes, this entering into a new orbit of my life is for me. Yes, this hyphenated last name is for me. Yes, this body is for me. When I was 13, or actually 14, I was asked, do you want a bat mitzvah? My secular Jewish school in Los Angeles makes the ritual pretty unique. No Torah, no Hebrew, no mention of Israel, no temple. Yes, ritual. Yes, celebration. Yes, making a moment in your life. Yes, interest in choosing a text to read. Yes, family members toasting to you. Yes, invitations and planning. Yes, party. This intentional process led me to answer, yes, I do want a bat mitzvah. Yes, I am interested in reclaiming this tradition so that it feels like me. How could this ritual not be for me and us and we? What does it look like for us to look to the folks around us, friends, family, loved ones, mentors, teachers, kids, grandparents, neighbors, and ask, as the Black lesbian poet Lucille Clifton did, won't you celebrate with me? It's tiring to be the holders of shifting and change and newness as we claim our yeses for this bat mitzvah, for any ritual. I think the folks and world around us must shift too. Won't you celebrate this marker in time that feels right for me? Won't you shift your understanding of what and how this ritual could look and instead lean into possibilities? In a hall covered in vines in a state park in the Los Angeles mountains, my best friend and I got on stage and shared with our communities about our hyper-specific chosen relationships to our Judaism. Out of my year of research and preparation, I wove together the histories of resistance fighters throughout my familial and chosen legacies. From the Afro-Brazilian, diasporic, and Jewish-American communist roots to Queen Nzinga, who fought for the Portuguese and their expansive slave trade in Central Africa, Saint Escrava Anastasia, who even a metal muzzle wouldn't stop from speaking up for enslaved Afro-Brazilians, Emma Lazarus, who wrote poetry that fought for the humbled masses, and my great-aunt Yetta Stromberg, who won the 1931 landmark Supreme Court ruling against banning the raising of a red flag. My bat mitzvah was about claiming my multiple identities and saying yes to me and my community. I ask you, how can the claiming of all your layers empower you and you and you and us to reshape, craft, and form all the ways we can ritualize these markers of a moment?
Hi. Sorry. I'm Amalia Levine, and I'll be reading for Satya's Sumudio. Can't I just have a party? You don't need money to have a good party. All you really need is the people you care about most, the people who are going to celebrate you. The best party I've ever been to is at a public park. You can do it on the sidewalk, and it could still be amazing. My party, it was in downtown Oakland. We had a projector playing cool silent music videos, like I think I had Take On Me. People danced and lifted me and my mom up on chairs. It was really fun. At first, I didn't want to have a bat mitzvah, but my mom didn't really give me a choice. Once I started, though, I really, really loved it. I found a sense of community in the other kids in my B'nai Mitzvah classes. I realized that a lot of other people were struggling too. We were all in different places with our learning and with growing up. For my ceremony, I chose prayers that were special to me, poems about liberation, justice, and freedom. My dad is from a Mexican Catholic family, and he and his friends played music during the ceremony while the rabbi blessed me. My uncle undressed the Torah. Friends and family surrounded me while I sang from our sacred scroll. All the different ways people participated in the ceremony made me feel really connected to the people I love. My Torah portion came from Leviticus, and it was horrible. Everyone else got fun, weird stories, and mine was just a bunch of boring rules, like kill a bird and drip its blood over the stone, and put the stone on the body, and then put this person in isolation or whatever. It was gross. There was a section about woman menstruation too. It said that a woman is deemed impure during that time, so she's treated as someone who's sick or diseased. She has to be isolated. I felt unsure. Am I really gonna stand up in front of all these people and talk about people on their period? Then I watched United in Anger with my mom. The movie tells the story of ACT UP, an activist group that formed during the AIDS crisis. It shows how society stigmatized people who had AIDS. My teacher gave me The Red Tent to read, a book about women on their periods who go to a ceremonial place all together. All of this made me think about people who are stigmatized, but also about how people seek healing. I turned my drosh into a critique of the Torah. I said that as a woman, who is also Jew of color, I see and know what it is like to experience oppression, shame, prejudice, and inequality. And I see all these forces from a lot of different perspectives. I said that we need to work to make change. All the nervous feelings I felt before I started floated away as people's excitement rose. It made me feel happy to speak up for what I believe. I was really carried by everyone. My Bat Mitzvah made me feel connected to myself and my community in a way that is really unique. I can't describe that feeling, but I know how special it is. Parties can be fun, and Bat Mitzvahs can be fun too. I say, have both.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke Ler, and my piece is dedicated to the real Satya Samudio, who's not here today, and also to all of her comrades and fellow students now in SJP and JVP, and all the students that are teaching us. Who made it possible for me to be here? Dear Satya, what a gift to be your mother, to witness and support your growth, and through you to nurture the next generation. On this page, I offer you a blessing of those who came before, those who are past and present at once. They made it possible for you to be here. Some are our elders now, and others have passed on. May these words light their yahrzeit candle. For Miriam, who brought the people to wells of healing water. For Esther, Judith, Pua, Shifra, and Vashti too, warriors for our survival. For the unknown women. For the laboring mothers in fields, kitchens, and marketplaces. For the Jewesses, the dangerous seductresses, the dancers. For the readers and writers who never had the chance. For their secret lives, hidden letters, unfulfilled dreams. For the persecuted, the poor, the sick, the queer, the jailed, for the unloved, for the oppressed past. May we soothe you, call you comrade, and fight alongside you. For the radicals, from anarchist Emma Goldman and anti-war martyr Rosa Luxemburg to transgender warrior Leslie Feinberg, their irreverence stoked the fire of justice. For the organizers, for Clara Lemlich-Shavelson, who called for a general strike, for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, for the Jewish aid societies, for the communists, socialists, and anarchists, for Solidarity Forever, for the artists who dared to dream, for Claude Cahun, whose self-portraiture imaged new genders, new ways of being, for Frida Kahlo, who painted visions of revolution and realities of pain and ecstasy. For Mariana Yampolsky, creator of Mexican popular art. For sculptor Eva Hesse, whose life, like her art, was ephemeral, gone too soon. For feminist artist agitators like Nancy Spiro. For Nan Golden, whose lush photographs revel in the counterculture. For the poets. For Muriel Rukeyser, who asked what would happen if one woman told the truth about her life and offered this answer in response: the world would split open. For Aurora Levins Morales, who writes a Puerto Rican Ashkenazi ancestral healing path. For Irena Klepfis, lesbian poet born in the Warsaw Ghetto, whose translations of Yiddish women writers keep Yiddishkeit alive. For the ghetto women who smuggled arms to fight the fascists, who blew up crematoriums in the camps, who set dynamite to train tracks along the forest. For the Jewish women of the Weather Underground, Prairie Fire, and Women Against Imperialism, who opposed US militarism, racism, and Zionism in one breath. For Frances Beale, Black, Indigenous, Russian Jew, Black Power movement leader, and founder of the Third World Women's Alliance, whose anti-Zionist family inspired her feminist commitment to challenging colonialism across the globe. For Laura Whitehorn and Susan Rosenberg, lesbians and militant anti-racist activists who spent a combined 30 years behind bars for supporting Black and Third World liberation. For Ella Shohat, Iraqi Jewish scholar who wrote of Mizrahi identity as a route to Jewish belonging in the Arab-Muslim Middle East. For Ahoti Sista, the Mizrahi feminist organization. For the Jewish feminists who transformed ritual practice, who stood at the Bima, who made Shavuot and Torah study groups, who reclaimed the divine feminine Shekinah, who said no to transphobia, who gave us a feminist Seder where we all recline and we all read, where we place an orange and an olive on the Seder plate. This inheritance is yours, whatever you make of it, to keep, to reject, to heal, to transform. I believe in you. Love always, Mom.
Hey y'all, I'm Kendra Watkins. I'm answering the question, do I have to study Torah? Torah is an opening into relationship, not only with Jewish tradition, but with the people who are creating and recreating that tradition every day, including you. In my own learning, I have found that when I hold Torah close but lightly, I feel empowered to bring my own voice into dialogue with the text. Staying in that conversation is to accept a deepened sense of responsibility. Regardless of our relationship to the text itself or of what our day-to-day lives look like, Torah is one thing we all share. If Torah is a place where we can meet each other, then Torah also holds the potential for us to learn and shape our Judaism together. For me, that responsibility shows up as a commitment to shaping a Judaism that celebrates Blackness and queerness, and creates the space for us to imagine and work toward a free Palestine in solidarity with Palestinians. I often wonder what it means to hold something dear to me that people have used to justify violence, to claim a piece of land and displace its indigenous inhabitants. There are no easy answers for grappling with the ways our sacred texts have been used and exploited as justification for violent and unholy actions. What I do take heart in, however, is that this tradition of ours is bigger than you or I can imagine, and it is ours to explore and play with and transform. Thankfully, our tradition doesn't expect us to figure it all out alone. In fact, we are encouraged to study Torah with a chavruta, a learning partner. A chavruta can be anyone whose perspective is interesting to you and who you can trust to share your own reflections and feelings about the text with, what it means to you. While the words of Torah stay the same, we are all works in progress. Wherever you are in your journey with Torah, you meet it with a little more wisdom and a little more experience each time you come back. So, I won't tell you that you have to study Torah, but if you do, you might find more than you ever imagined. Torah is not only a holy book, cultural artifact, and a ritual object. It is also one of our most beautiful tools for honoring and transforming our community and the world. Whatever comes out of your encounters with Torah is also Torah. It isn't just you who gets to learn. We get to learn from you too, and we are all better for it.
Hi, hello. My name is Eitan, and I'm answering the question, do I have to give a speech? To start, the answer is no. You do not need to give a speech in order to become a bat mitzvah. But I want to tell you why I think that speeches are important and powerful. My family lived in an Orthodox Jewish community, and when I was a teenager, I started to doubt my belief in God. I spent hours questioning my teachers and rabbis, asking them for proof of God's existence. No one could prove to me that God was real. I became increasingly confident in my atheism as time went on, but when I tried to explain it to my friends, none of them believed or agreed with me. It felt like they just couldn't hear what I was trying to say. I'm not trying to tell you that I know the truth about God. I just wish that I had known how to explain myself so that my friends could understand why I thought differently than them. Think about a time in your life when everyone was saying something that you felt was incorrect. You were sitting there just listening to them, all of them saying what seemed like the absolute wrong thing while you knew the correct answer all along. Sometimes a speech can help you explain where you're coming from and why you think differently. But just telling people that they're wrong won't do the trick. Most of the time, when you tell people that they're wrong, they just close their ears and stop listening. When people stop listening, it doesn't matter how many times you say it or how loud you shout it. They simply won't hear what you have to say. Try telling them a story instead, a story about who you are and how you learned something and what an idea means to you. Taking the audience on that journey invites them to imagine for themselves what that would look like and feel like, and helps them understand your perspective. My parents, my mother and father, grew up under the colonial regime of apartheid in South Africa. This brutally racist and violent government segregated Africans and other non-white people into separate parts of the country, denying them the ability to vote, to travel, and to act as equal citizens. Both of my parents knew how bad apartheid was. My dad grew up in a black family and school and felt the cruelty of apartheid when their home was demolished to make room for white families. My mother grew up in a Jewish community, so worried about the safety of Jewish people that they chose not to rock the boat by fighting against apartheid. Both of my parents were able to use their stories to find and connect with other people who were outraged at the injustice. Together, people from all around the world heard the stories of South Africans experiencing colonial violence. They came together to end apartheid through a movement of boycotts. As a bat mitzvah, you are entering a new stage of life where people want to hear your voices. They want to hear your opinions, and the words you say matter. It is your right to stand on a stage and tell people who you are and what you believe in. But don't just tell us what to think. Tell us a story.
Hi, I'm Dori Midnight, and my question is, who cares about bat mitzvahs in such a messed up world? In 6th grade, my parents told me that as soon as I had my bat mitzvah, I could choose if I wanted to continue with my Jewish education or not. So 2 months after I turned 12 and bled through my special occasion underwear at Valley Beth Shalom in Los Angeles, I declared myself a witch and a feminist and never went back. Witchcraft was my gateway to revolutionary feminism, queer liberation, and racial justice. With my little teen coven, I learned to cast a circle, read tarot, invoke the elements, and make potions. It made so much more sense to me than what I learned at Hebrew school. But somehow everything I did as a witch was still felt very Jewish. I had this nagging feeling inside that sounded a lot like my great-grandma urging me not to toss thousands of years of tradition aside. Her voice sang in my bones. There's magic in this inheritance. Oppression and assimilation have estranged us from the magic in Judaism. I see this in my own family, in their dismissal of the wisdom of our grandmothers as superstitious, and the erasure of my mother's Sephardic lineage. I see this in the ways that mainstream Judaism has suppressed the multitude of expressions and experiences and names of the divine. While we've been forced to hide some of our practices for fear of looking like witches, our rituals are full of liberatory potential. Collective rituals are rooted in the ancient and ancestral. We have the opportunity to draw from these legacies and point these potent practices towards the world of which we dream. But what do rituals actually do in a world on fire? Jewish practices and traditions have been co-opted by Zionism, Ashken normativity, whiteness, and employed as tools of assimilation and capitalism. But it doesn't have to be that way. Our rituals can be counterspells. They can give us a taste of the world we dream of, the world to come, a world centered in justice, joy, and mutual aid. A world in which Palestine and Palestinian life are thriving, and being Jewish has nothing to do with nationalism or militarism. As young teen witches, when we would cast a circle, we'd utter the phrase, "We are between the worlds, and what happens between the worlds affects all the worlds." This means what we do in the magical, sacred space that is created in collective ritual ripples out in widening circles, spurring changes we may not even be able to imagine. Perhaps it helps to think of your B'nai Mitzvah as a spell or an action. What do you want this ritual to do? To change, to make possible, to heal, to transform? There's something so powerful about chanting words your ancestors have chanted for thousands of years in your own unique voice. Something powerful about you speaking before your community about that which you believe. A B'nai Mitzvah is a powerful rite of passage in which you can step even more fully into who you are. What is the world you're dreaming of? How can you use this day to cast that spell?
Hi, my name is Elise Ben-Shushan-Cohen. What does my Bat Mitzvah have to do with Israel and Palestine? The Brit Mitzvah, a gender-inclusive term that means covenant of the commandment, should be an open-ended journey that helps you connect to your background, personal convictions, and multiple Jewish perspectives. Jewish people are diverse and diasporic. We have deep histories and connections with lands across the world, from North Africa to Southwest Asia, from Eastern and Western Europe to Russia, from Ethiopia to Latin America, and more. Some of us know our family histories and can identify our ancestors' languages and cultures. Others might find these histories traumatic because their family lineage includes brutality, forced migration, or enslavement. Or perhaps they or their family members are Jews by choice. For me, the Isle of Rhodes, Turkey, and Cuba have been significant places of longing as I seek to understand what kind of world my family lived in and what possibilities are to be found there for the future. However, in my 3 decades of work as a Brit Mitzvah tutor, I have seen time and again how Jewish institutions often drive young people to conflate and collapse Jewish identity with nationalism, Zionism, and Israel. This subtle or not so subtle indoctrination hinders imagination and stifles critical thinking. It prevents you from developing your own Jewish identity and spirituality. From my experience as a Sephardic woman raised in the U.S. South and living in Atlanta, and as an advocate for racial justice and Palestinian freedom, I know that there are so many more meaningful ways to connect to the Jewish people, to God and the divine, and to our broader world. When the state of Israel gets centered as the foundation of Jewish identity, our Jewish diversity is erased. We focus on worshiping the state of Israel rather than God, and the Torah is replaced with nationalism. Disappointingly, Jewish community institutions often lie about and hide the profound harm Israel has done and continues to do to Palestinians, to Jews of color, or Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews from Southwest Asian and North African ancestry. Maybe these institutions fear that these truths will alienate you. However, deceit and silence is far more likely to turn young Jewish people away from identifying proudly. Time and time again, I see that you, as young Jews, are eager to see the world for what it really is and to help make it a better place. Torah study itself offers a powerful model for how to ask questions about authority and justice. In my own child's Torah portion, God tells the Israelites that they will slaughter nations as they pass through the land of Canaan, taking over land by force. Disturbed by this violence, my child used their Devar Torah to condemn colonization and genocide. Grappling with difficult Torah portions help us learn about and challenge these oppressions in our contemporary world. Though the Brit Mitzvah can be stressful and challenging, it is also a dynamic and influential time when you should be encouraged to be authentically yourself, defining what it means to be Jewish to you and sharing your own truths with our community and the world.
Hi again. This is the beginning of the second part of the book, second section of the book called Learning from Palestine. Thank you. I'm reading for Khulud Balata, What Do Palestinian Kids Do When They Turn 13? And Khulud wrote this text as a reconstruction of her diary in 2014 during Israel's bombing of Gaza. July 8th, 2014, 7:34 p.m. Dear Diary, just 7 days ago, I filled you with my joy at turning 13. That was just 2 pages ago. How fast and shrewd time can be. War is returned. You know best, it never ended anyway. My nightmares and screams are fully described to you and you only. The sad news is that you are doomed to even heavier pages. I'm sorry, but you is my only refuge now. I am hushed and silenced with bread and some water. I guess everyone are afraid, but none has the courage to speak out. I have you. Electricity just went out and my mom is lighting the candles. She says it's not healthy for me to write with the light of the candle. How funny, right? Write soon if I will survive. July 22nd, 2014, 4:35 a.m. What beautiful dream I just had. It was our top graders' celebration. Classroom white container, landscape behind, my long braids, zebra-like uniforms, my best friends, Asil and Iman, and I, chalks, red-dyed fingernails, beautiful-faced Barbie on the wall. But boom, a nearby explosion just shocked me awake, snatching me from all that beautiful dream. The fat, bald-headed TV's reporter is part of our daily life now. His voice is everywhere. On TV is photos of Shred's children like me. Ambulance alerts, pale faces, half-open windows, and dry summer air. Earlier this evening, my uncles and grandparents moved to one of our relatives' homes. They heard that our neighbors had been alarmed to evacuate. shivering. It is so cold. I wish we run away with them. My parents mocked them. No place is safe in Gaza. I am not safe, but I still wish we run away. I don't want to die now. I'm too young. August 30th, 2014. Diary. It ended 4 days ago. I couldn't write earlier, but I survived. School back again. Not much to say about the summer holiday. September 2nd, 2022. Dear Diary, today I received a writing job on what turning 13 for Gazan children feels like. Had I experienced it, I could have streamed pages on what embarking on your teens feel like. But no, I survived a war, one that lasted for almost 2 months. I was awaiting my death. I saw people my age being buried. I pitied them, but I pitied myself way more for being alive. Alive to witness all of this. At least I was privileged to live 8 days of my teens. It doesn't mean that I had a very wonderful tale to tell here, but others couldn't make it that far. Your pagers are heavier than ever now, I know. I'll extract some. For a lighter beginning for both of us, amen. Yours, Khulud.
Hey everyone, my name is Mahdi. What does the watermelon symbolize to Palestinians? One of my fondest memories from my childhood growing up in Jerusalem was coming back home after playing in the garden only to find that my parents had prepared a platter of cold sliced watermelon. My mother would bring out the large tray with a mound of watermelon slices, each glistening with sugar, redder than the other. Blocks of salty white cheese accompanying the feasts. This was my favorite summer snack, and I followed each bite of watermelon with one of white cheese, repeating this until I felt sick to my stomach. In Palestine, watermelons are locally grown and a staple of our diet and sold everywhere. Some vendors will even go as far as to balance watermelons on their heads, hoping to attract more customers. In the summer, you're guaranteed to see a watermelon in every Palestinian household, and the larger ones, those too large to place on a table, are set on the floor until it is time to slice them. In Palestinian popular culture, watermelons have also come to symbolize Palestinian identity and resistance against the ongoing Israeli occupation of our lands. The watermelon's colors, its green skin, white rind, red flesh, and black seeds, are the colors of the Palestinian flag: green, white, red, and black. When Israel occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, what was left of historic Palestine, in 1967, Palestinians were forbidden from flying the Palestinian flag. Israeli soldiers regularly confiscated our flags and arrested those who raised them. During the first Intifada, or popular uprising, in the 1980s, Palestinians resisted the occupation in all sorts of ways, including by flying the flag. In Jerusalem, school children regularly climbed the old city walls before dawn and hung the Palestinian flags on the ramparts. The police always scrambled to remove them and find and detain the kids who put them up. They really hated that, the police. During protests against home evictions and demolitions, people always brought out flags in full knowledge that they would be immediately confiscated. And my younger brother drew a Palestinian flag with colored pencils that is still taped to his bedroom wall to this day, decades later. So Palestinians found many ways, many ingenious ways, I should say, of expressing solidarity with the popular revolt. Artists wrote graffiti and painted murals using the colors. Families hung their laundry from balconies in the colors green, white, red, and black. Seamstresses embroidered Palestinian thawbs, or traditional dresses, with these colors, and so on. In 1980, the Israeli army arrested 3 Palestinian artists, Sliman Mansour, Nabil Anani, and Issam Badr, and the Israeli officers deemed an exhibition of their paintings too political because they had used the colors of the flag. According to Mansour in an interview, one of the Israeli soldiers told the artists that they were even forbidden from painting a watermelon, since a single slice exhibited all 4 colors. This is the story, we are told, of how the watermelon became a popular expression of Palestinian identity and a global symbol of solidarity with Palestine. Artists such as Khaled Hourani and others really continued to paint watermelons. Lawyer Abed Asali, who represented many arrested Palestinians, stepped into an Israeli military court one day eating a slice of watermelon. And these are stories of young men who defiantly walked the street with slices of the fruit, risking arrest from Israeli soldiers, almost tempting them. Today, people across the world post the watermelon emoji to express their solidarity online. And I should say, increasingly, we're seeing it everywhere as well. And when I see the watermelon, I think of this entire history. I think of the unbreakable spirit of our people, and I think of my mom's cold platter on a hot summer's day. Thank you.
My name is Morgan, and I'll be reading for Basil Abbas and Ruan Abu Ram. What does the cactus symbolize to Palestinians? If you see cactus, know that a Palestinian village used to be there, my father says, on the long drive from Jerusalem to Haifa. Cactus was used to draw where a village began and to protect it. Cactus is incredibly resilient against being uprooted and eradicated. The smallest bit can spawn whole new growths, whole new generations. I smile as though we are sharing a secret. So the cactus is us, and we are the cactus. This part we do not say out loud. We just know as we fall into silence. Out of the car window, I search for an invisible land, traces of what has been erased, something to make real what we can no longer see but know is still there in the land. We were here. Where there is now a nature reserve, a path of pine trees, a road, a settlement, there was once a Palestinian village. Every time I spot cacti, a whole subterrane opens up to me, as though the cacti were part of our bodies, as though they were our bodies, rooted in the land. Our bodies folding in and out of each other. 20 years later, I'm still searching. We are searching for the more than 500 destroyed villages in historic Palestine, each one an entire world. Beit Suzin, Kufer Barim, Suba, Sataf, Nabi Yusha, Kula, al-Zanat, Kirbet al-Laz, Hittin, Kuwaikat. The map can only take us so far. It is a map of return, made to find that which has been made to be invisible. And then we return to search for cacti, searching for that green prickly shape, the orange flowers, the fruit, bodies falling in and out of each other, bodies holding each other. We search in the middle of a forest full of pine trees planted to obscure the village remains. We search at the site where pine trees, unable to adjust to the climate in Palestine, burnt the summer before. We search at the edge of a settlement bearing the same name as our destroyed village. We are searching a landscape made unrecognizable for a part of ourselves. The cactus is us, and we are it. We are searching not just with our eyes, but with our ears. We were here. We are still here. The cactus calls out to us. The land calls us to return.
What does the spoon symbolize to Palestinians? I grew up between alternate realities. When the last school bell rang for the summer, I would come home to pack my bags and fly overseas to visit my grandmother and relatives in Palestine. The moment we landed, my safe and relatively comfortable life in Albuquerque, New Mexico became a life of unease and discomfort. Under military occupation, I saw scary soldiers with big guns. I waited in long lines in the hot sun to be checked by soldiers when I wanted to move from one place to another. On those summer days, I listened to my relatives' stories about the violence they faced living as an occupied people. The stories that always haunted me most were of my relatives who had been jailed as political prisoners in Israeli prisons. These stories helped shape my understanding of the meaning of freedom. During a mass uprising, known as the First Intifada, my uncle protested in the streets for freedom. Israeli soldiers arrested him, and he served 10 years in prison. I asked him one day, after he had been released, how it felt to be free. What he said next would stick with me until this day. I was released from the boundary of a small prison back into the larger cage they have confined us in. For me, this is not freedom. Freedom is the ability to create your path and pursue your dreams for yourself and for your family without anybody stopping you. Here in Palestine, the Israeli occupiers are doing everything they can to stop us from achieving freedom. But with our tools, intelligence, and steadfastness, we will inevitably win it back. On September 6, 2021, my uncle's words echoed my mind after reading the news of the great escape of 6 Palestinian men held in a maximum security Israeli prison, for the same reason my uncle was. They were freedom fighters. For months leading up to the escape, one of the prisoners had been digging a tunnel underneath his prison cell. With determination to be free in his mind and a spoon in his hand, he advanced through the tunnel, which deepened over time. Other prisoners joined in to make this dream of freedom become a reality. During the days of their escape, Palestinians across the world unified in joy. We cheered our heroes on. Their willpower to achieve freedom invigorated our larger Palestinian struggle. Before the week's end, the Israeli occupiers had recaptured them. Our hearts broke, but our spirits as a collective reignited. The spoon has become a symbol of resistance for Palestinians and oppressed people worldwide. With both a spoon and our long history of organized hunger strikes, we offer the world renewed optimism and our collective perseverance to create a world without prisons.
I'm reading on behalf of Sandra Tamari, all of our hero. What does the key symbolize to Palestinians? 15 days, that is what my father-in-law, Elias, thought when he, his parents, and his brother fled their home in Jaffa, Palestine, in May 1948. The family was terrified. There was shooting everywhere in town. Zionist fighters fired at Uncle Edmund's house down the street. Everyone in the family argued about their next move. Elias's father didn't want to leave, while his mom, Julia, said staying would mean leaving their sons to die. Julia won out. They made the difficult decision to flee to a safer area of Palestine in the West Bank, where they had family. I don't need my winter coat, Elias announced, throwing the heavy garment onto the bed. We'll be back in 15 days. Then he turned the iron black key to lock the door. Those 15 days turned into a lifetime. Elias first went to Ramula among the fortunate Jews with a place to go. The family stayed in his cousin's now crowned house. They didn't have to walk to Lebanon or take their chances on small boats tossed into the Mediterranean Sea, as so other Palestinians did. But even still, with all these breaks, Elias's father died within months of losing his home and country. The cause, heartbreak. Elias, a man in his mid-20s, soon set out for Beirut to look for work and a new life. He met American relief workers who sponsored him to come to the United States. A boat called the Homeland delivered him to Ellis Island in New York in 1952. Elias spent the rest of his life working as a relief worker. He lived around the world, absorbing the cultures of places like Bangladesh, the Ivory Coast, and Haiti. Everywhere he went, he carried his Palestinian sense of family and hospitality. Whenever I saw Elias encounter a Haitian at the grocery store or in a cafe, he would flash his biggest smile and ask for their family name. Within seconds, he would identify their home village and name a dozen relatives of theirs he knew. Elias never stopped telling us stories about his beloved Jaffa. He could list every family that had lived in their neighborhood and made sure his grandchildren, my kids, knew that in Palestine he had had a pet donkey and that there used to be a piano in the living room. When Elias was 90 years old, he brought him home. He was only a tourist, but we took him to see the house that had been stolen from him. He guided us to the neighborhood and walked up to the door. It was unlocked. Elias entered the home he hadn't seen in over 60 years. The Jewish Israeli woman in the house wasn't scared, only curious, and she allowed us in. Elias was saddened that his mother's beloved fruit trees no longer flowered in the garden. Though we left after a few minutes, we were determined to return again. There are millions of Palestinians scattered across the globe because they are prevented from returning. I've been blessed to meet many of these Palestinians on visits to refugee camps in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Jordan. In each place I went, a key hung as a symbol of return, hope, and determination. The key to Jaffa House still hangs on our wall, ready to unlock the place where we belong.
I am reading for Dylan Saba, answering the question, where are Palestinians now? Like many in the Palestinian diaspora, I have family all over the world, from Palestine to the United States and back. I think often of my family still in Gaza, the cousins I've met only once, when I visited as a child in 2000, before the blockade. We raced turtles in the front yard. We laughed under the winter sun. I remember the soldiers' guns and my fear. The soldiers seemed so big to me then, yet so young to me now. I think about the fear my cousins must feel when Israeli bombs rain down upon their home. I know that the walls erected between us fracture us as people, but I dream of a world where we can be together again. In 1948, Zionist paramilitary forces exiled about half of the indigenous Arab inhabitants of historic Palestine, in forming the newly declared State of Israel. Palestinians call this series of events the Nakba, the Arabic word for catastrophe. The 750,000 Palestinians have, over the generations, grown in number to become the second largest refugee population in the world. They now total over 7 million people, surpassed only by the total number of Syrian refugees. The largest population of Palestinians in exile currently live in Jordan, but substantial populations also live in Lebanon, Syria, the Gulf states, and even outside the Middle East, in countries such as Chile and the United States. The conditions of exile vary greatly. Many of those originally exiled in 1948 and their descendants have never been granted citizenship by their destination countries. They remain trapped in refugee camps. Others, such as my family, managed to acquire foreign citizenship and have, to greater or lesser degrees, assimilated into other states. Many Palestinians who remain in historic Palestine are internally displaced from their homes, confined to the West Bank or Gaza. The Nakba forced my grandmother out of Haifa and my grandfather out of Jerusalem. They both fled to Gaza, where they eventually met and started a family. In 1967, the Six-Day War, known to Palestinians as the Naksa, meaning setback, sent the family to Qatar. Eventually, in 1972, they migrated once more to Beirut, Lebanon. Because my family is Christian, they were able to get citizenship, while Muslim Palestinians could not. Soon after their arrival, Lebanon entered into a terrible civil war that defined the childhoods of my father and his siblings. As soon as they finished up school, they left. My father and his sister ended up in the United States, my dad in California, and my aunt in New Jersey. Their brother lived in Muscat, Oman, and then Athens, Greece. My grandparents stayed in Lebanon for many years before eventually moving to New Jersey. The Palestinian diaspora is well into its 8th decade of exile. Ongoing land theft, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid remind us the Nakba is far from over. Both from within Palestine and throughout the diaspora, Palestinians have always engaged in resistance, from general strikes to armed struggle to nonviolent protest movements and more. United across our differences, we voice a common demand: Palestinians in exile, as well as their descendants, must be able to return home. We want to live in a liberated Palestine.
My name is Sunny, and I'm reading for Olivia Katby. Why are Palestinians calling on the world to boycott Israel? I attended my first protest for Palestine during the summer of 2014 while Israel was bombing Gaza. Thousands of people took to the streets of Chicago. I heard protesters raise their voices to support BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. All of a sudden, the stories I heard growing up in my Arab family with Palestinian relatives became clear. BDS is a tactic for our people to get free. Since then, I've helped organize many boycotts of products and companies involved in Israel's violence against Palestinians. In 2020, we spread the word to boycott Pillsbury because the company made dough for their products at a factory in an illegal Israeli settlement on stolen Palestinian land. We went to grocery stores and put stickers on Pillsbury products. We passed out flyers to shoppers. We protested at their headquarters and at their meetings. We kept making noise on social media. And after 2 years of our campaign mounting pressure, we won. Pillsbury shut down the factory. Woo! Boycotts are a nonviolent tactic of refraining from participating in or purchasing something. They have a long history in anti-racist movements and have helped bring about material change. The most famous example of this is the Montgomery bus boycott, where Black people in Montgomery, Alabama refused to ride the city bus for more than a year, successfully overturning its policy of racial segregation. The Palestinian call for the world to boycott Israel is inspired by this tradition, as well as similar boycott campaigns in South Africa that successfully overturned apartheid. The movement is also inspired by our own Palestinian legacies of resistance. When the British revealed plans to establish a Jewish state in Palestine, Palestinians organized boycotts of Zionist and British businesses and institutions. This led to a massive general strike in 1936, where Palestinians withheld their labor and didn't show up to work in order to put pressure on the British decision makers. Boycotts and general strikes became a common tactic of resistance in response to British and Zionist violence over the decades to follow in all of the Arab world, not just Palestine. The most recent call for BDS is an attempt to involve the rest of the world, especially those of us who live in countries that provide a lot of military funding to and maintain friendly relations with Israel. We have a pivotal role to play in exerting pressure on the decision makers and leaders of our countries to hold Israel accountable. Palestinians issued a call for BDS in 2005 to urge those of us around the world to help pressure Israel into following international law. This would mean ending the occupation of all Arab lands, dismantling the apartheid wall, granting full equality to Palestinian citizens of Israel, and recognizing the right of all Palestinian refugees to return home. Across the globe, community groups, churches, unions, artists, universities, political parties, and even governments have participated in BDS. In addition to supporting boycotts, they've also divested their endowments and pensions from companies participating in the apartheid. The hope is that if we take enough of these actions and major governments start joining in by issuing sanctions, we will help topple the apartheid state of Israel, just like in South Africa.
Hey y'all, I know this is a marathon reading, but most marathons I've been to have a lot of water getting thrown at people and a lot of movement. So if you can stand up, I'd love if you could just join me in standing for a second while I get this set up. All right. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you. You can do that again if you want to. Y'all can do it yourselves. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From all the rivers to all the seas, each of us will all be free. Thanks, y'all. This wasn't a lecture. It's supposed to be a reading, and I want y'all to be a part of it. So please give it up for yourselves, yeah. Part of why I wanted y'all to stand is because my section is How Do Palestinians Celebrate? When I was 14, I spent the final summer in Gaza playing football barefoot and each morning in the garage with my cousins. Often, oh, you're welcome to sit down if you'd like. Often the ball would cross out of our makeshift stadiums and we would go get it. We built our rituals in retrieval and returning, where I found bullets pitted in the porous cement walls of my late grandmother's home. That same summer, I spent evenings on the blacktop playing pickup basketball with boys I would never learn the names of. As Israeli helicopters and F-16 fighter jets riddled the night sky, I'm a product of immigrants and their faith. People whose being is rooted in resilience and a land soaked in blood. So when I think about a celebration and how it is that my people, Palestinians, celebrate, I think of how unremarkable it is. We eat, we dance, we play, we laugh, we love. Not a single one of those acts is unique to our communities, yet there is something uniquely beautiful about existing through those acts in the face of everything that seeks to undo you. What is celebration really? Is celebration merely the recognition of success? Do I celebrate a win on the court only after the buzzer has sounded? Or is the act of playing in and of itself a celebration to be savored with each passing second? And what does it mean to celebrate when my cousins remain in Gaza, struggling and suffering in the world's largest open-air prison? No place is safe for us. The Beckett family boys were killed playing soccer on a beach I am no stranger to. A beach I too have run upon, my feet sinking into the sand with each step, my balance shaky with each kick of the ball. Like many marginalized communities under attack, to be Palestinian is to find celebration in everything we do. The rising out of bed, the dribbling of basketballs, the crying of tears, the debka at weddings. Each act we embark upon is a celebration of the moments we have survived, and a recognition that our tomorrows are hunted. Each day I take a breath in this world is an opportunity to pursue joy. Each day I make steps in this world is an opportunity for liberation. Each day is an opportunity to channel that joy and proximity to liberation collectively with like-minded people who believe in boundless joy and liberation for all. That is the world I strive to live in, and while it may not yet exist, I must celebrate every soccer ball that surges from my feet, every basketball that floats off my fingertips. Every action is a reminder of the possibilities we can make more real with each passing day.
I'm Jay Saper. And we're now going to turn to the third section of the book, Unlearning Zionism. Have there always been Jews who opposed Zionism? In 2018, thousands of Palestinians in Gaza marched for their right to return home, while Israel unleashed tanks, tear gas, and snipers to suppress the historic demonstrations. Palestinians kept coming back, week after week, for more than a year. I joined a group of Jews in New York City to recite the mourner's Kaddish for the murdered Palestinians. We locked our arms together at Senator Schumer's office, calling on him to condemn the violence. As the NYPD hauled us away in handcuffs, we did not feel we had betrayed the Jewish people, but instead honored our proudest Jewish tradition, taking action for social justice. History shows we are not alone. In 1897, German rabbis protested the first Zionist Congress, successfully keeping it from being held in Munich. Rabbis in the United States issued resolutions opposing Zionism as well, affirming Judaism's commitment to peace, justice, and love. Socialist activists in Vilna founded the Bund that same year. The widely popular anti-Zionist group connected the struggle for the rights of Jews in diaspora to the struggle for justice for all. In 1917, Great Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, supporting a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Edwin Montagu, the only Jewish member of the British cabinet, sharply pushed back. Arthur Balfour was a notorious anti-Semite who fought to keep Jewish pogrom refugees out of Great Britain. Montagu understood the Balfour Declaration as an invitation for anti-Semitic leaders the world over to expel their Jewish populations. He denounced Zionism as a mischievous political creed. In 1922, Palestinian politician Jamal al-Husseini invited Mizrahi Jews to form a united front with Palestinians. To our Jewish compatriots who have understood the goals of the Zionist movement and the damage it will cause, we open our arms to them today and call, come to us. We are your friends. In 1945, Iraqi Jewish intellectuals founded the Anti-Zionist League. At the outbreak of the Nakba, Jewish intellectuals Hannah Arendt and Albert Einstein, both refugees from Nazi Germany, condemned the Zionist massacre of Palestinians in the village Deir Yassin. In 1948, Joseph Abilia, regarding Palestinians as his siblings rather than as enemies, became the first person to go on trial for refusing to join the Israeli military. In 1952, Einstein declined an offer to become Israel's president and said, "My awareness of the essential nature of Judaism resists the idea of a Jewish state." Anti-Zionist Jews in Algeria and Morocco, including Daniel Timsit and Abraham Zerfati, fought to overthrow French colonialism. In 1971, Mizrahi activists, inspired by the revolt against racism in the United States, formed the Israeli Black Panther Party, confronting racism in Israel while building solidarity with Palestinians. In 1980, New Jewish Agenda became an outspoken group for the rights of Palestinians and queer Jews. Amidst the wave of Palestinian uprisings known as the First Intifada, Claire Kinberg, Irina Klepfish, and Grace Paley formed the Jewish Women's Committee to end the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. Ella Shohat denounced Zionism's racism against Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews. In 1996, activists founded Jewish Voice for Peace, the largest Jewish organization in the world to support Palestinian freedom. Long before Israel ever existed, Jews have opposed the idea of forming a military to expel a people and build a state. Jews who found nothing shameful about living in diaspora. Jews who denounced the confines of nationalisms and turned toward solidarity, embracing a joint struggle for collective liberation. The next chapter in this story is up to each of us to write together.
Hi, my name is Shirley Bachar. I attempted to answer, what do Mizrahi Jews remember? Earlier, last summer, my dad had a stroke. Then he got COVID. In the backyard of the rehabilitation hospital we sit in when I visit, he often slips back into his mother tongue, Turkish. "I'm sorry, I got confused," he says as soon as he realizes. My parents immigrated from Istanbul to Tel Aviv shortly before I was born. I grew up speaking Hebrew. Every night, after tucking my dad into bed at the hospital and getting on my bike to ride home. I dream of a life where my dad would have taught me Turkish the way he taught me how to ride a bicycle, with patience, instilling trust that he'd run after me if I fall, joy in the frivolous freedom of the two-wheeled, and confidence in myself. Scholar Ella Shochat vividly recounts growing up as a bilingual Arab-Jewish child in the state of Israel of the 60s, when Arabic was considered the prohibited language of the colonized Palestinians. Quote, "Soon I learned to master Hebrew in the socially correct form, that is, minus the Iraqi accent. I was very good, an excellent self-colonized student." Almog Bechar, also Iraqi, writes, quote, "Before her death, my grandmother went back to speaking Arabic only, no Hebrew, and I, as far away as I go, will return in my last months of life before my death to speaking Hebrew only." In forgetting to speak in Hebrew, my dad, perhaps blissfully, forgot the Eurocentric Zionist demand placed on him and all of our elders, Jews from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, to abandon a language that our families have spoken for hundreds of years. Perhaps now he can pass this familial communication to me. He can teach me again how to ride that bike. Where forgetfulness has occurred, we replace gaps with stories. Stories are precious gifts. Our elders remember Turkey, Iran, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan. They remember back where they came from. They were Arab Jews or Sephardi Jews or simply Jews. Their lives defied the divisions and false binaries between Arab and Jew that Zionism created and obsessively upholds. The circumstances of living and dying are unequal and different for Palestinians and Mizrahim because Zionism racialized us differently. But I'm convinced our pain should be understood together, not despite, but precisely because Zionism positioned us separately. As a scholar and activist, I encourage Mizrahi Jews to speak up in solidarity with Palestinians. We must refuse the lie that perpetual animosity has always divided our people. Our pain may be distinct, but it is intimately interconnected. Our pain stitches our stories inseparable. Riding a bike, like speaking a language or commemorating and remembering, is a practice, a muscle in need of building and maintaining. Just as I must relearn to pedal after a 20 years hiatus, so too must our bodies relearn the cultural practices that our ancestors and elders once treasured. Zionism plundered our shared physical and mental lineages. In order to imagine and build the world of the future, we need to proudly claim our culture back. I carry this knowledge within me, the knowledge my dad passed on, the knowledge his brain cells have long cast aside. I carry myself, this knowledge, my cultural inheritance, home, mostly stably on two wheels. Thank you.
My name is Maya Edery, and I will be answering the question, why do I get a free trip to Israel? Try not to fall in love with an Israeli soldier, my friends and family teased, before I cashed in on my free trip to Israel my sophomore year of college. They always send cute ones to staff the trip. It was a particularly cheeky joke in my family while I prepared to go on birthright, since my Ashkenazi American mom studied abroad in Israel when she was in college, and came home from her summer abroad with a Moroccan-Israeli boyfriend just out of the army. Today, I call him Abba, or Dad. But my friend Hannah, and roommate in college, didn't find anything about the trip a laughing matter. Why would you go on a brainwashing trip when Israel is maintaining a military occupation of Palestine, she asked me. I admit, it did seem a bit contradictory to my values as a person who cares about justice. But ultimately, I decided to go because I wanted to visit Saba and Safta, Grandpa and Grandma. As for brainwashing, how bad could it really be? The answer, really bad. It turns out Hannah was right. 2 flashbulb memories from my experience on Birthright are seared into my brain. Quite frankly, they still haunt me. The first is the day our guide took us to see what I now call the apartheid wall. He told us this wall separates benevolent Israelis from dangerous Palestinian terrorists, that it keeps us safe, keeps us alive. He spoke of it with a reverence typically reserved for the sacred Western Wall in Jerusalem. The second memory comes from Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem. My Saba is an Auschwitz survivor who came to Israel as a refugee at the age of 14 after his entire family was murdered. I walked through a dark room filled with floating candles. As a voice read the names of children murdered by the Nazis, I had chills and felt sick to my stomach. Immediately after exiting the exhibit, our guide led us to a view overlooking Jerusalem. This, he said, is why we have to defend and protect Israel at all costs, so that the Holocaust will never happen again. I still have that same pit in my stomach just writing these words, remembering how I felt hearing my family's trauma in the Holocaust used to justify supporting a state that is in itself committing what I have come to find no other word to describe but genocide. How could he so blatantly use our very real pain to justify violence against Palestinians? I refuse to justify the ongoing murder, theft, and occupation of the Palestinian people. I refuse to believe the myth that Jewish safety can only come at the expense of the humanity of Palestinians. After returning from the trip, I helped organize a national campaign of students who believe birthright cannot simply be reformed or rebranded, students who return the birthright, students who believe Palestinian refugees have a right to return home. There is no free trip to Israel, only one that requires you to participate in a violent system of apartheid while Palestinian refugees are not able to return home. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dori Midnight. I'll be reading for my friend Jonah Eileen Daniels' question, why do people plant trees in Israel as a bat mitzvah gift? Trees are present, beautiful, rooted, flexible, kind, and wise. Swaying with the sacred winds, trees house and provide rest and respite for winged creatures, insects, and other small animals. Trees tie us to deeper, slower timekeeping and create networks of interdependence. Tu B'Shvat is one of the many celebrations our ancient tradition has to honor the wisdom of our foliaged kin. What kind of relationship do you have with trees? Is there a tree that is special to you? What have you learned from trees in your life? You may be surprised to learn that trees could ever be used in a harmful way, but the Jewish National Fund has done just that. Their campaigns to raise money with little tzedakah boxes and plant a tree in Israel certificates may sound lovely and just, but the truth is that the Jewish National Fund uses trees to cover up the historical and continued colonization of Palestinian land. How do I know? In 2013, I traveled on a delegation to plant olive trees in Palestine with the Stop the Jewish National Fund campaign. We listen to the story of Palestinians who now must fight and struggle to harvest from their ancestral olive groves, an essential part of their economic survival and cultural lives. Settlers and soldiers alike regularly attack Palestinian groves, overturning trees hundreds of years older than the State of Israel itself. We also visited Jewish National Fund forests. We saw the pine trees they had planted with the funds they collect, and learned that pine trees are not native to Palestine. They turn the soil acidic, making it difficult for native plants such as olive and oak, pistachio and pomegranate to grow. Beneath the fallen needles of the pine, we could see remnants of Palestinian villages destroyed during the Nakba. My friend from Sherman Oaks, California, noticed a plaque honoring his hometown for funding this particular grove. Our hearts broke open and we cried together, feeling grief and shame as we retraced our community's involvement in destroying this beautiful place and covering up the evidence. We committed to making these heartbreaking truths known. Many people gift Plant a Tree in Israel certificates to loved ones or relatives to honor our most sacred moments, births and deaths, B'nai Mitzvahs, and weddings. The Jewish National Fund deliberately abuses our emotions, exploits our spiritual tradition, and appeals to our community's deep concern for justice, our yearning to create a better and greener world, to entangle us in a heinous project of colonization. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can return to our traditions of valuing human life and embracing trees for healing and connection to the earth. We can demand that this abuse of people, land, trees, and our traditions end. The Middle East Children's Alliance, along with other organizations, created the Plant a Tree in Palestine project as an alternative to the Jewish National Fund certificates. The U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights created a similar campaign called Rooting Resistance. Former donors to the Jewish National Fund have joined these efforts, calling out the organization's deceptive practices. May we follow the lead of Palestinian people struggling for justice and root resistance together by planting olive trees in Palestine.
Hello, my name is Brant Rosen, and I'm the rabbi of the congregation Tzedek Chicago in Chicago. And I was honored to write an essay for this amazing book, Questions to Ask Before Your Bat Mitzvah. And I'm honored to read it to you now. It is entitled, Why Are There American and Israeli Flags in My Synagogue? In my former synagogue, American and Israeli flags were prominently displayed in our sanctuary. A member raised objections to their presence before the board of our congregation. After discussing the issue, we decided to take the flags down. No one objected, and there are no flags in that congregation to this day. Most American synagogues display national flags in this manner. They are often placed on either side of the Aron Kodesh, the ark that contains the Torah scrolls in the synagogue sanctuary. According to Jewish American scholars, the display of flags in synagogues became common practice following World War I, when synagogue-attending Jews sought greater acceptance as Americans at a moment of rising intolerance toward immigrants. The practice of displaying an Israeli flag began after the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, as increasing numbers of American Jews began to actively identify as Zionists. However, members of synagogues are increasingly challenging this practice as inappropriate and even offensive. Some argue that as national symbols, flags have no place in a synagogue, particularly in a synagogue sanctuary. Flags are powerful symbols of national allegiance, but according to Jewish tradition, our ultimate allegiance is to God and God alone. During the synagogue service, we express this allegiance to God when we bow toward the Aron Kodesh for the Amidah and Aleinu prayers. But when flags are placed next to the Aron Kodesh, the most sacred place in the synagogue, they are given a sanctity equal to the Torah itself. Worshippers must bow toward these flags, which many see as a form of idol worship. Don't forget that in the second of the Ten Commandments, God tells the Israelites, "You shall have no other gods besides me, and you shall not bow down to them." Yet when we put flags in our most sacred of spaces, we do exactly that. We bow down to the flags of nationalism. The display of an Israeli flag is also seen as problematic because a growing number of Jews believe that the establishment of the State of Israel resulted in an injustice to the Palestinian people and do not consider themselves to be Zionists. When a synagogue displays the Israeli flag inside or outside its building, however, it implicates every congregational member with the State of Israel, whether they want to be or not. In the United States, many are reconsidering the legacy of patriotism and nationalism. When quarterback Colin Kaepernick knelt during the national anthem to shine a light on American racism against people of color, many athletes followed his example. So too, increasing numbers of students in American public schools are refusing to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag to protest American racism, colonialism, and militarism. Whether as a religious or political statement, or both, a new generation of synagogue members are determining that flags have no place in the synagogue.
Hi, I'm Ita, and I'm going to attempt to answer the question, what is pinkwashing? Spoiler alert, it's not good. There is nothing more inspiring to me than witnessing a moment when a trans girl is experiencing freedom. When something is bubbling up inside of her that is more important than all the looks and limitation around her, telling her how she is supposed to be. Crossing these limitations, trespassing the expectations other people put on us that block us from our freedom dreams is a practice. It can be exhausting, but you can learn from it. Learn to recognize all kinds of borders and limitations the world puts on people. Learn to draw inspiration from all the ways people are fighting to be free. But sometimes that collective dream seems very far away, and those in power will act like acceptance is the closest thing to freedom we deserve to have. Israel, for example, gives conditional acceptance to queer and trans people who support it in exchange for a branding effort known to queer and trans activists around the world as pinkwashing. Queer and trans Palestinians, including members of organizations like Aswat and El Kaus, have called out Israel for developing and perfecting this deceitful tactic. Israel uses pinkwashing campaigns to appear LGBTQ+ friendly, covering up its horrible treatments of Palestinians. Pinkwashing simultaneously portrays Palestinians as especially homophobic and transphobic, and somehow uses that as a justification to treat them as less human. Queer and trans Palestinians resist this narrative. They tell us that the biggest threat to their existence is not their own communities, but the state of Israel itself. When Israel bombs Gaza and arrests people without due process in the West Bank, when it demolishes and steals home in Misatiriata and Sheikh Jarrah, when it separates families from their loved ones and doesn't allow them to return to their land, it is using aircrafts, rifles, walls, borders, and laws that don't ask for anyone's gender or sexual orientation beforehand. Queer and trans Israelis who refuse to support Israel get punished for who they are as well, though to a much lesser degree than queer and trans Palestinians. As an Israeli trans woman who is vocal about her unconditional support to Palestinian freedom, I more often than not receive transphobic slurs and threats by supporters of Israel, even when I am not speaking about being trans at all. Even when the same people then tell me that I am lucky to exist in a country that accepts me for who I am. As Ayelet, a 16-year-old Israeli trans man who got arrested in the Tel Aviv Pride Parade in 2022 for holding a sign with a Palestinian flag on it, said, "A trans woman who is a soldier will be able to receive hormonal treatment, but a trans woman who is an army refuser will be sent to a men's prison." But luckily for us, where there is state-sanctioned violence that restricts any body or any land, there will always be resistance. So, if you are young and queer and trans and reading this, I hope you know we are here. I hope you choose whatever moves your spirit towards freedom. I hope conditional acceptance will never feel like enough. I hope you remember that only a place that respects everybody's freedom is one where anybody can truly belong. Thank you.
Hi. I'm Bazid, and I'm reading, I'm answering the question, what's the problem with dialogue, though? When I was 16 years old, I applied to a summer camp program that brought Arab and Israeli teenagers together at a lakeside camp in Maine, where life, we were told, was already the way it should be. As an Egyptian who'd grown up in a fairly disengaged, apolitical family, I kind of knew there was always like stuff going on in occupied Palestine, but didn't know its history. Despite my ignorance, I was accepted into the program and flew across the Atlantic to a Garden of Eden, so verdant, the mornings crisp, afternoons hot, the lake water clear and sparkling. Blueberry patches everywhere to be plundered at the end of long kayak trips. It was one of the only places on earth where occupied Palestinian teenagers were jet skiing with Israeli teenagers destined to graduate into doing the occupying themselves only a handful of years later in regulation army conscript uniform. And that was what made the place so unique. Where else could young people destined to be enemies put aside their hatred, their fear of the faceless other, and meet across a meal? Where else sleep side by side without mortal fear? Where else bond over frozen lasagna, a crime against the palate? Nowhere else in the world were Israeli and Palestinian and Arab teenagers engaged with each other in actual dialogue. Accordingly, reporters and documentarians lined up, filming and photographing the heartwarming scene. The founder of the org was fond of saying things like, "This isn't a place to compare suffering," and "make one friend. That will make all the difference. Make one friend, just make one friend." And there are two sides to every story. For many years, I was very active in the program. I was a true believer. I thought we were changing the world, but I was wrong. Because dialogue is not dialogue if it is divorced entirely from its content and context. If the kind of dialogue that's possible in Lake Country, Maine, sounds ludicrous in the open-air prison of Gaza, then it's not really dialogue. It's fantasy. It's whitewashing. It's media sound bites for Carnegie Hall fundraisers and philanthropic tax write-offs. Dialogue is not dialogue if it does not acknowledge structures that birthed and continually reinforce the occupation. Making one friend won't stop a bomb from dropping, won't topple the apartheid wall, won't cure a traumatized, entrapped population. Dialogue is not dialogue if it requires one side to downplay its lived experience in order to make a conversation feel equal. Sure, there is no reliable calculus for comparing human suffering, but there are readily available, well-documented, highly legible statistics that narrate massive power imbalances, as well as chronically unequal losses in lives, livelihoods, homes, olive groves, infants, toddlers, teenagers, young adults, seniors, gravesides, dignity, hope, and faith in the future. Not to mention the most obvious, the loss of literal ground to stand on. Dialogue is not dialogue if one population has its knee on the other's neck. Thank you.
Imani Altumus Williams is anti-Zionism, anti-Semitic. Just after I returned from a trip to South Africa, my high school English teacher invited a Palestinian to speak to our class. He spoke of enduring the theft of his homeland, rampant racism, military checkpoints, and overflowing prisons. I was struck by how similar it sounded to the stories I'd heard of South African apartheid and the vestiges of it that still persist today. I was eerily reminded, too, of the continued colonial legacy of what is now referred to as the United States. As I sat in that English class as a young, mixed woman of Black, Jewish, and distant Choctaw ancestry, raised in US-occupied Hawaii, I understood colonialism and apartheid clearly. I understood the plight of this man's struggle. What I couldn't understand is why he and those who support his struggle for freedom, the freedom of our Semitic relatives, are so often smeared as anti-Semitic. The vast majority of Zionists in the world are Christian Zionists, a movement that erupted in the 1840s in England, when most Jews rejected the emerging push for Jewish statehood. Christian Zionist support of Israel is based upon their desire to bring about Armageddon and the return of Jesus Christ. This comes at a grueling price. The book of Revelation tells us that 2/3 of Jews will die in the rapture, while the last third will have to convert to Christianity. Quite simply, Christian Zionism is anti-Semitic. I'm compelled to believe that inherent in Zionism is also internalized anti-Semitism, a constant chase for acceptance from the same European supremacies that invalidated our humanity and all those who were deemed other. As a Jew of color, I know too well that Zionism does not include me in its vision for refuge. Israel has forcibly sterilized Ethiopian Jewish women as a precondition for them to immigrate to this state. This is anti-Semitism and ethnic cleansing. As a diasporic woman of color, I know the grief of being disconnected from one's land, the incessant feeling of forever homelessness. I anguish in sorrow at failed attempts to strip native tongues, suppress cultural rootedness, and eradicate spiritual depths in pursuit of false power. I know the agony of witnessing one's land and people be poisoned and ancestral burial grounds desecrated, all in the name of profit. Our Jewish teachings suggest that we must pursue justice. If being Jewish means being a good human being, as my grandparents once said, being Jewish means not only honoring my own truth and pain, but also that of Palestinians. I join in the struggle to deoccupy Palestine from the colonial hands of the State of Israel as a revolutionary act of love for self and for the mutual liberation and transformative healing of all lands and peoples. I reject the weaponization of anti-Semitism by organizations like the Anti-Defamation League that masquerade as a civil rights group, while smearing my beloved comrades who care so deeply about fighting for freedom for all. For me, there is nothing more fully Jewish than anti-Zionism. I embrace anti-Zionism in honor of Jewish tradition, in my pursuit to be, as my grandparents insisted, a good human being.
How do we honor the legacy of the Holocaust? My grandmother Rivka was 5 years old, living in a shtetl in Lithuania. The village was half Jewish, half not. One day, Rivka's parents received a letter from her aunt and uncle in America, asking, "Will you send one of your children to visit us?" Of the 5 children, Rivka was randomly chosen to go. So one day, a crowd waved her off at the train station. She didn't know it at the time, but she would never see her family again. Nobody ever told Rivka exactly what happened next. The postcards just stopped coming, and slowly she came to imagine the worst. Decades later, in May 2014, my parents and I traveled to Lithuania to return on Rivka's behalf. There we met a frail 88-year-old man outside a dilapidated yellow house. He was the last living Jew from Rivka's shtetl. We followed as he led us to a large field. Then he turned to us and, to our shock, told us how our family had been killed. Soon after Rivka left, he told us, Nazis encircled the town. At gunpoint, they forced the men, including Rivka's father, to dig a mass grave. Then they marched the women and children past their non-Jewish neighbors to the pit. The Nazis stripped them naked one by one and forced them to kneel. Then they pulled the trigger. "You are now standing on top of that grave," the old man said. I gasped. I wept. I turned my head back towards the town. What about the neighbors, the bystanders, who watched this happen and did nothing? Two months later, Israel began bombing Gaza, a strip of land with 2 million Palestinians penned in without drinkable water. I watched on social media as the Israeli military hailed explosives on what's often called the world's largest open-air prison. I read reports of horrors beyond words. They bombed little boys playing soccer on the beach. They bombed whole neighborhoods. They bombed a family except for one child who will learn today that everyone they love has been massacred. I grieved harder than I've ever grieved. Utterly horrified, I looked up at the skies. How can this be happening? Growing up, I learned that Jews needed a safe place to go after the Holocaust, and that's why Israel was founded. But nobody ever told me that they did so by expelling 750,000 Palestinians from their land. Nobody ever told me that Israel has been expelling, imprisoning, and massacring ever since. Now I understood. The horrors of my family were being used to justify horrors against Palestinian families. And I had been scripted into the role of bystander. In that moment, I decided that if they would have me, I would be honored to commit myself fully to the Palestinian struggle for freedom. It has been the main focus of my life ever since. There are days when I'm called a traitor to the Jewish people. Sometimes it stings hard. But here's what I am certain. The truest way to honor my family, to honor the fluke of Rivka's survival and therefore my own, is to act today like the neighbor I wish they'd had then. Someone who would scream at the top of their lungs, organize underground, put their body between the killers and my family. The truest way to honor my history is to commit to being anything but a bystander until Palestinians and all people are free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We're entering our last section of this book. It's called Bringing It Back Home. And before we do that, I want to shout out two things. First is this beautiful section of a larger, huge quilt made by an international collective called Hope in the Art World, both Palestinians and Jews and lots of people around the world. It was unfurled at the Met Museum to protest their complicity in the genocide of Palestinians. And they are selling prints of each section of the quilt to help families evacuate from Gaza. You can scan the QR code that's being held up in the back if you'd like to buy a print. And Sarah is over here. You can raise your hand if you have any questions about this amazing project. Let's give it a round of applause. We also want to move money today to the Palestinian youth movement. Can we hear it for the Palestinian youth movement? We are so honored and so grateful to be following their leadership and their incredible courage and bravery and clarity. So there's a really easy way to move money to them, which is through an app called Venmo. And their Venmo is at NYCPYM. And so as we launch this final section of our evening, we invite you to move money to the Palestinian youth movement. There's also, you can visit their website. And let's hear it for Free, Free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! And here's the home stretch.
I'm Dean Spade. My piece in the book is called, Doesn't the US Do a Lot of the Same Things as Israel? Yes, that is so true. In 2012, I went to the West Bank. I was invited by a group of queer and trans Palestinians. They asked a bunch of queer and trans activists from the US to come over and see what was going on in Palestine so that we could be part of the work for change. I was shocked by many of the things I saw, and many of them matched what I've seen in the US. I saw people living under apartheid. In the city of Hebron, I saw a place where sidewalks were segregated, with Palestinians not allowed to walk in certain places. I thought about the history of apartheid and segregation in the United States. I thought about how the US buses and water fountains and schools and bathrooms had been segregated, with some of these clearly marked whites only. These days, the US doesn't have that kind of explicit apartheid. However, there are lots of spaces and places that are unofficially whites only, where cops or vigilantes will hurt or exclude people they don't think belong. In Palestine, I also saw Israeli soldiers protecting Israeli settlers, doing illegal things like taking Palestinian land or attacking Palestinians in the market. This reminded me of how in the US, the law protects cops who kill Black people or vigilantes who attack trans people. It seems like in both the US and Israel, law enforcement is often used to support and protect people who are doing harm to targeted groups. It's awful. I also learned about how Israel puts lots of Palestinians, including kids, in jail. Same in the US. And like the US, Israel has a very militarized border where Palestinians are harassed, hurt, and even killed trying to cross borders to go to work or fulfill basic necessities like going to see the doctor. I also learned more about Palestine's history. Palestinians' land was taken and they were pushed into refugee camps. Many are still being displaced by new settlements and the continual expansion of the apartheid wall. Here in the US, we have a very similar history. European settlers showed up and took the land by force and drove indigenous people into reservations. And even today, indigenous people in North America experience further land takings when the US protects energy companies building new oil pipelines and other toxic projects on indigenous lands. It's not surprising that Israel and the US do a lot of the same things. They're funded and run by many of the same ideas and forces. For example, the US gives billions of dollars to Israel every year. It makes sense to me to care about opposing injustice in the US and in Palestine, since my US tax dollars contribute to both, and since both are terribly unjust. Since there are similarities in how these two countries are hurting people, I can also collaborate with and learn from Palestinians about what kinds of resistance we might build together. We can target the companies that are building border walls in both countries or selling arms to both countries. We can oppose training programs that train US cops with Israeli soldiers to spy on and hurt people in our communities. We can work together to figure out what kinds of resistance work we can do to stop the violence and build liberation for all.
Hey y'all, so I am honored to read on behalf of my friend Jody Peterson-Smith. As I get to that page, I wanted to say thank you all again for being here. I did not mention this earlier. I used to be in PYM till I felt too old to be in it. And so there is the People's Conference happening in Detroit this year in May on Memorial Day weekend. So please sign up for that. Yes, woo if you want to woo. And so feel free to support that as best as you can. Feel free to attend if you'd like to. It is also movement weekend, so if you like raves, I guess you could do that too. But, you know, we'll also be like raving towards justice for those of us who, you know, want to be in like sessions with comrades. So why are we talking about Israel when we have so many problems here? Mahdi Peterson-Smith. My 9th grade global studies teacher came to class one day and said, "Today I'm going to tell you about why Palestinians are so pissed off." He took out a set of maps that showed the loss of Palestinians' land over the 20th century. Honestly, I was in disbelief. Also, just to describe, Mahdi Peterson-Smith is a black fellow who is taller than me with an afro. So that is who I am speaking on behalf of, for those who don't know Mahdi. Honestly, I was in disbelief. I had heard the story that Israel was a land without a people for a people without land. The idea that a group of people who were oppressed for thousands of years finally got their own state was very compelling, particularly for me as a black kid. Startled by this new information, I delved into my own research. I didn't know any Palestinian folks, so I read whatever I could get my hands on about Palestine. Everything I read confirmed what my teacher had said. So I started speaking up for Palestinian rights. And when I did, I noticed people would often ask me the same question. If you support Palestinians, then what about Native Americans? Do you think that they should get their land back too? They think that as a resident of the US, there's no way I could also support the indigenous people having the right to determine what happens on their land for fear of what it might mean for me and my community. But they are wrong. I do support returning the land to indigenous peoples. The state called Israel and the state currently called the United States may be physically distant, but their stories aren't entirely distinct. Usually people making the comparison between them do so to justify the most violent features of them both. The US currently gives Israel billions of dollars each year to pay for weapons, and Congress keeps upping that allowance. This funding of Israeli violence is typically justified by American officials who say Israel is in a dangerous neighborhood. They tell the same story about where I live as well. I've heard all my life that my neighborhoods are dangerous, and that supposed danger is used to justify racist violence. Our neighborhoods are over-policed to make them safe. White racist individuals arm themselves, supposedly to defend themselves from our communities. So when US politicians say that Israel has the right to defend itself in a dangerous neighborhood, I know far too well that this is simply an appeal to a very American racist mentality. We have so much injustice to address here, but US and Israeli injustice feed each other, and we will not overcome one without overcoming both.
For those of you who grew up in the 90s, you'll see my Elsa Peretti Jewish star that I wore especially for tonight. My mother always says, when people tell you who they are, believe them. And she's sitting right over there, actually, so say hi to Deidre Meyerson. In summer of 2017, hundreds of white supremacists gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia, for a two-day protest called Unite the Right. Amidst a national rallying cry led by Black Lives Matter to remove Confederate monuments, the white supremacists gathered to defend a bronze sculpture of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. The protesters, uniformly clad in preppy khakis, button-down shirts, and fresh crew cuts, with cleanly shaven faces, began to chant, "Jews will not replace us." What you might be asking yourself, what do Jews have to do with a bunch of bigots trying to safeguard racist statues? Unite the Right was not simply about statues or free speech. That's Rio. It was the coming out party for a new and emboldened brand of 21st century white supremacy. These protesters were telling us exactly who they are. They believe that Jews are secretly orchestrating a plot to bring non-white people to the United States to replace existing white power structures and threaten the preservation of white life. This is known as Great Replacement Theory. The 2022 mass shooter who killed 10 black supermarket shoppers in Buffalo cited it in his 180-page manifesto. We cannot understand the anti-Semitism that animates Great Replacement Theory and contemporary white nationalism outside of the anti-black racism and xenophobia at its core. The 2018 gunman who massacred 11 congregants of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh specifically targeted the Jewish community because of its commitment to support refugees. When racist controversies to pit our communities against each other, we must refuse to play into their logic. We should celebrate our legacies of solidarity and recommit to them proudly. While a lot of Jews are ordinarily perceived as white, we all stand to gain by joining side by side in the fight against white supremacy. The streets of counter-protesters in Charlottesville showed us what this solidarity can look like. As the white supremacists, unhindered by the police, encircled a group of singing clergy, including the black philosopher and activist Cornel West, anarchists and anti-fascists rushed to their defense. "They saved our lives," West said. A central tenet of Judaism has been our ability to survive many forms of oppression. You may have heard the joke, "They tried to kill us, we won, now let's eat." We escaped Pharaoh in Egypt and survived expulsion from Spain and Portugal, the pogroms of Eastern Europe, and the Holocaust. Jews have oftentimes had to make our lives on the fringes of society, to live among our neighbors, but overwhelmingly as outsiders. Today, while white nationalism has been on the rise, Jews who look white still experience a fair amount of comfort and privilege in day-to-day secular life. For those of us Jews who are not white, it isn't our Jewishness that generally makes us fearful of the state, but our blackness, our Asianness, our Latinidad. White supremacists tell us who they are over and over again. Our job is to believe them. White supremacy threatens the collective well-being of us all. The only solution is to come together in joint struggle. Free Palestine.
Hello, I'm Aiden. I'm going to be reading on behalf of Jonathan Benneman and myself, responding to the question, why are there Israeli flags at right-wing rallies? We are Jewish and Palestinian researchers who keep a close eye on the right. It's a bizarre place. Many of the right-wing people who hate Jews love Israel. Seriously. Many on the right love Israel because of their anti-Semitism. How can this be? Well, they primarily fall into two overlapping groups, white nationalists, which we just heard about, and Christian nationalists. Both have caused a lot of harm to people we love, so let's break down the basics of both. White nationalists. A few years ago, anti-Semitic neo-Nazi Richard Spencer praised Israel as the perfect model of an ethno-state, where one ethnicity or religion dominates all the rest. Basically, he said, hey, if Israel can be just for the Jews, then the US can be just for white Christians. The right's love for a Jewish state goes back over a century and has long been motivated by white supremacy and anti-Semitism. As we also heard before, the famous Balfour Declaration, offering British support for a Jewish state in Palestine, was issued by a virulent, racist anti-Semite. He had little regard for Palestinians living there and was eager to remove Jews from Britain. Many on the right today still don't think Jews belong in the US, Britain, or anywhere else but Israel. Christian nationalists want the US to be governed by their interpretation of the Christian Bible, including discriminating against queer people and non-Christians, limiting reproductive rights, and teaching only Christianity in schools. Their foreign policy goals are based on Christian Zionist beliefs. Christian Zionism is actually older than Jewish political Zionism and is deeply rooted in a hatred of Muslims. Many Christian Zionists also believe the Bible predicted the creation of the state of Israel as part of God's plan to end the world. To them, the end of the world is good because Christians will be taken to heaven by Jesus, and everyone else, including Jews, will be damned to hell. To help fulfill this biblical prophecy, Christian Zionists promote Israel's most extreme policies that hurt Palestinians, funding right-wing and extremist Israeli organizations and settlements, supporting politicians who help arm Israel with more weapons, and demonizing supporters of Palestinian human rights. The overwhelming majority of Zionists in the world are Christian. There are tens of millions of Christian Zionists in the US alone, with millions more across the globe. Since there are only 15 million Jews in the world, this means there are far more Christian Zionists than there are even Jews at all. Long story short, there are Israeli flags at right-wing rallies because the right wing believes in the US and Israel's shared national stories, that the US is for Christian Europeans and Palestine is for Jews. Let's be very clear though, these are both racist and anti-Semitic ideas. One important lesson we can learn from the right wing is that white Christian supremacy is our common enemy. We are all better off living in a world that says goodnight to the right.
Okay, hello. My name is Noah Habib, and I will be answering how do we actually end anti-Semitism, which feels like a form of entrapment giving me this question. I hope I still agree with it. I think I do. So, the fight against anti-Semitism is critical. Our history teaches us as much. Immigration restrictions, housing discrimination, pogroms, the Shoah. At worst, our history is a story of atrocities enacted on us, but we're still here. Why? Because our people have learned how to resist, how to act on the world for ourselves and for others. I work at an LGBTQ synagogue where I direct a legal clinic for asylum seekers, most of whom have left their home countries because they were harmed for being part of the LGBTQ community. Almost none of these asylum seekers is Jewish. But together with trained volunteers from the synagogue and far beyond, we accompany them through the asylum process so that they can win asylum and continue to live safely in the United States. Some might think this sort of work puts the Jewish community at greater risk, and I can understand where they're coming from. The fascist who killed 11 Jewish people at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018 targeted that community specifically because they were actively supporting immigrants' rights. This man targeted a synagogue and Jewish people because he opposed immigration from majority non-white countries and believed that Jewish people are to blame for engineering these migration flows. He hoped his attack would not only kill Jewish people, but also strike a blow to the movement for immigrants' rights and stop migrants from seeking safety in the United States. But in the wake of the Tree of Life massacre, it's more important than ever for us not to isolate ourselves from others, but instead proudly recommit to our honorable legacies of solidarity. Conspiracy theories about Jewish control and power are just that, conspiracy theories. They don't depend on the reality of what we actually do. So when we involve ourselves in movements for human freedom, we become protagonists in the struggle against anti-Semitism and the struggle for freedom for all. Doing immigration legal work at a synagogue rather than a law firm or a legal service provider is really special for me. I get all the Jewish holidays off. There's free food in the fridge on Mondays after Shabbat. But also it feels a lot holier to do that work in that context, and it helps me feel more deeply connected to Jewish communal values. Once a family with a young child attended our evening legal clinic, and we worked with them for a number of months on an asylum claim. And one day when we finished our work for the night, we found that the son had scribbled on the whiteboard in the childcare room, "We love Jewish people." And his mother told us that in our home country too, it was the Jewish community that had helped us when we needed a hand. And that's actually something I hear relatively frequently from people. So when we accompany migrants through the unjust US immigration system, we forge ties that also fight anti-Semitism. We perform the mitzvah of welcoming the stranger rather than oppressing the weak. We create the relationships necessary to protect our own community and to fight together for so much more. So in short, we build solidarity. So the fight against anti-Semitism is interconnected with other struggles for human emancipation in a very concrete way. To transform society and to end anti-Semitism, we have to build a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious coalition of everyday people. We have a world to win.
Hi. My question is, I'm just a kid. What can I do? And my name is Aya Osato. I think the real question is, I'm just a kid. What can't I do? Right? No, seriously. It's always been young people leading movements for social change. It's been young people standing up, shouting, "Wait, this isn't fair. This isn't right. We need something else." At age 8, Autumn Peltier became an indigenous water protector, speaking out against environmental racism. At age 10, Fred Hampton began hosting weekend breakfasts for other kids in Chicago, which eventually grew into the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program. At 11, Ahed Tamimi defended her Palestinian village against Israeli soldiers. At 15, Greta Thunberg started organizing school strikes for climate justice in Sweden that spread across the globe. My mom's from a working class Jewish family in Queens, and my dad's an immigrant from Japan. And they're right there. Hi, guys. They're both feminists and taught my sister. Yeah, family. They taught my sister and I to always speak up for what we believe. My mom carried me on her shoulders when I was a toddler at my first protest defending abortion. In elementary school in 1991, we marched demanding the government take action on the AIDS crisis. In high school, we led walkouts protesting the NYPD's murderous violence and their desire to put cops in our schools. I'll never forget when my friend Sabrine, sister of legendary poet Suhair Hamad, was doing my hair before senior prom. We started talking about our backgrounds, and she shared that she was Palestinian. She said that during the Nakba in 1948, when Israel was created, her family was kicked out of Palestine, and they lived in a refugee camp in Jordan and haven't been allowed back to Palestine since. OMG, what? Until that moment, I didn't actually know that Israel was where Palestine was and is. She was blowing my mind and my hair. I felt so sad and ashamed and upset to learn that Israel, this place that I didn't really feel any connection to was oppressing Palestinians while claiming to represent me and my people. What did I do? Well, I learned that when I feel sad and angry about something that's terribly wrong, I can join with others and find hope in taking action together. So alongside other students, we organized teach-ins about Palestine. We joined the campaign for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS. We learned about the work of Palestinian artists resisting colonialism. There are so many ways that you can participate. Join a protest in solidarity with Palestine. Write a letter to the editor denouncing Israel's violence. Join an anti-Zionist Jewish organization. Ask people to donate to grassroots Palestinian organizations or mutual aid projects for your B'nai Mitzvah. Every single day in Palestine, teens are arrested, imprisoned for resisting colonization and for simply existing. The Zionists who are trying to steal their land know how powerful teens are, and that's why they're doing this. But these cruel acts of preemptive punishment don't actually work. Young people's spirits are too strong and powerful. The youth are the truth. And honestly, sometimes grown-ups need reminders of what matters. Sometimes we get stuck in how we've learned to do things and forget that there are other possibilities. We need to be pushed to make a change. You are the fire we all need. Yes, Autumn and Fred, Ahad and Greta, and you.
Hi, my name is Esther Farmer. And this is my very powerful grandson, Marcus, who actually helped inspire me to write these words, and he's going to ask the question.
How do I talk to my family about this stuff?
I love that question. It's not easy talking about Palestine. We're so often dismissed when we try. We're told we simply don't know enough, or that we can't grasp the complexity of the matter. Most of the time, Palestine is simply off limits. But at this moment, when so many people, including Jews, are starting to question Israel's actions, it's the perfect time to have the conversation. Doing so is vitally important because every conversation is a chance to inspire a change of heart. Remember, there was Judaism before Zionism, and there'll be Judaism after Zionism. No matter how stuck in their ways people may seem, change is possible. Most of the time, that change is made possible because of your relationship with the person you're talking to. It's not from a flyer. Every conversation is an opportunity to deepen a relationship and make a connection. Every conversation contributes to building the movement to free Palestine. My father was born in Palestine before Israel was created. He identified as a Palestinian Jew. He was one of those folks that Morgan was talking about. He didn't believe that Palestine should be a country specifically for Jews, since 90% of the people there were not Jewish. As Jews, we know very well that oppression breeds resistance, and therefore, my family felt that the oppression of Palestinians would guarantee perpetual war, so that neither Jews nor Palestinians would be safe. I remember my father saying, "How can Jews be safe when they're kicking people out of their houses?" My parents' values inspire me to continue to speak out for Palestine to this very day. I'm moved to tell their story and help others share their own. I've helped organize a community theater project, Wrestling with Zionism, which is now a national project of JVP that has toured across the country. We stage deeply personal narratives about Jews coming to grips with the harm that Zionism has done to Palestinians, and Palestinians speaking directly to those harms. Stories are powerful in changing hearts because they're about people's experience. You can't argue. You can argue about facts, but you can't argue with someone's story. So I know so many former Zionists who have changed their thinking, some in this room. Sometimes they forget the process they went through to do that. They get angry when other Jews spew Zionist thoughts. I get angry myself, often. But since I'm passionate about justice, I continue having difficult conversations because Palestinians should never have to defend their humanity to anyone. When my anger builds, I anchor myself in my values. I speak from experience and build on the comments of the person I'm speaking with while asking questions that might help them think in a new light. These kinds of conversations can truly be transformative. We should be proud of speaking up and speaking out. For many years, I was ashamed of being Jewish and stayed away from Jewish organizing spaces because of what Israel was doing to Palestinians. It was only when I met so many anti-Zionist Jews, especially young Jews, that I was able to proudly proclaim my Jewishness. A good motto for anti-Zionist is something my mother used to say: we are Jews for justice, not just us. And that's the sentiment that is part of Jewish teaching, Tikkun Olam, and our obligation to repair the world. That's what it means to be a Jew. Our community finds itself at a crossroads. We must now make a spiritual and moral choice. Will we use our history of suffering to make sure no one else suffers? Or will we continue to hurt others in the name of our safety alone? Your conversations can help us choose the path of freedom for all.
Hello. Oh, hi. Thank you. Hello. I'm Dan Fishback, and I'm gonna read my response to the question, what if people get mad at me? People will get mad at you, and you will be okay. Now that you know that, you can deal with your fear. Fear is Zionism's greatest weapon because it keeps people silent. Acquaintances often whisper to me that they oppose Zionism but are too afraid to speak out. Sometimes I think that if everyone in the US who privately condemns Israeli apartheid would conquer their own fear, our country would quickly stop supporting this injustice. But most people don't want to speak out unless it costs them nothing. In that way, I wrote this last year, guys. I want to edit. The editing team on this book is so great, but now I want to go back in time and make changes. In that way, being an anti-Zionist is a lot like being gay. I came out at 15, which was very unusual in 1997 because homophobia was a lot more mainstream back then. Gay people were afraid that if we came out, we'd be shunned from society, and many of us were, and many of us still are. But coming out at 15 is normal now because enough of us survived, and closeted people saw us survived and realized that they could do it too. Closeted anti-Zionists are similar. They're waiting for people to be brave so that they can skip that part. It's up to brave people, us, to pave the way for them, even if we have to do some fighting along the way. In 2017, the American Jewish Historical Society canceled a reading of my musical Rubble Rubble because I'm an anti-Zionist. Shirley Bahar programmed that reading in the first place, though. Let's go over Shirley. At first, I was heartbroken. I'd worked so hard to prepare that musical, and my actors were counting on income that had suddenly disappeared. But more than that, I was depressed that a venerable Jewish institution had behaved so cowardly. And I had no idea how cowardly they would become in the next few years. But I soon remembered that I was not alone. Theater artists, friends, activists, and strangers, angered by the silencing of my voice, offered support. With their backing, I raised money for an independent reading of that musical. I shared my story with the press and spoke on college campuses around the country to normalize the very idea of a Jewish anti-Zionist. The forces of right-wing Zionism tried to silence me, but failed. I took their backlash and lashed it right back at them. How was I able to go down this path when so many others continue to choose fear? Number one, safety in numbers. I took solace in my community, my elders, and my ancestors. I didn't have to be brave alone. Number two, perspective. I understood that any adversity I faced paled in comparison to what Palestinians face every day. Three, glamour. It can be fun to receive anger if you know that the angry people are wrong. Your courage can give you pride and confidence. One warning, though, don't get cocky. It's easy to roll our eyes at Zionists when we know they are wrong. But if we get used to rolling our eyes at critique, we might ignore someone who has important feedback for how we can grow. That's when bravery becomes arrogance, and your arrogance is a greater danger to you and to the movement than their rage. Thank you.
Sherry Gorelick, and I've been given the honor of reading the essay. Can you hear me? I have the honor of reading the essay by the wonderful poet Aurora Levins Morales. What if I still have more questions? What could be better than having more questions? It means you're curious, which is one of the most important traits of human beings. My parents were two of the most curious people I've ever known. They taught me how to ask good questions and why some questions get in the way of useful answers. In other words, how to ask questions about questions. My father was a biologist. When he was just starting out, he studied how fruit flies change from generation to generation. He kept them in a lab and looked at them under microscopes, measuring their wings and colors. One day, my mother asked, "But what do they do when they're outside?" He found out that on the hot coast, some flies adjust their bodies to deal with the heat, while others just decide to live in the shade. My father's career went in a new direction. He started acting how living things interact and change each other, why they do what they do. When he went outside, his questions got much bigger. He used to say, "The truth is the whole." You can't know the truth without looking at the whole picture. Papi always left the microscope on the kitchen table for my brother and I to look at whenever we wanted. One day I looked at a pinch of ordinary tan sand from the beach. I was amazed. Instead of a bunch of tan grains, I saw dozens of colors. Bits of seashells in pink, red, purple, black and gray, amber and green, bottle glass, white coral, and bird bones. It's only from far away that the beach looks all one color. From that distance, it would be hard to guess what sand is made of. The same is true about people. Questions like, what do Palestinians want? Act as if the Palestinian people were a tan beach. You have to get close to people to see their many colors and know their lives. Sometimes you have to zoom in. What's a question that you could zoom in on? Sometimes, though, you need to zoom way out. What if we included absolutely everyone in our dreams of a better world? That's called universal solidarity. It means when we stand up for each other, all our lives become freer and more satisfying. The closer we get to standing up for everyone on earth, the better things get. Solidarity isn't an assignment. It's a way of living, and at its heart is curiosity. The more curious we are about other people, especially those we're mad at or fear, the closer we get to seeing the whole, many-colored truth. If we're curious enough for long enough, we'll start to understand why people do what they do and find ways to stand up for them, even if we still disagree. The more we stand up for others, the safer they feel, and the more they can be curious back. So keep asking questions.
Afterword. The stories shared throughout questions to ask before your bat mitzvah range from the pain of losing one's mother tongue to the sweetness of tasting watermelon on a summer day, from the joyous celebrations of becoming to the resolute determination of holding on to a key and its promise of returning home. From each distinct story in this collection, each unique voice of commentary, a common refrain emerges. You can choose freedom over fear. You can question the unquestionable. You can be unapologetically you. My Aunt Jerry taught me what it means to choose freedom over fear. As a child growing up in Jackson, Mississippi, white supremacists bombed her synagogue. Aunt Jerry helped to integrate the public schools, and her rabbi vocally supported the Black freedom movement that swept the South and helped overturn Jim Crow. The Klan was incensed. From the sanctuary hall to the steps of the rabbi's home, they took to dynamite to express their disapproval. But my aunt's community refused to back down. They wouldn't succumb to fear. Aunt Jerry carried on her commitment to upend white supremacy. Her rabbi kept fighting for freedom for all because he believed in a prophetic Judaism and social justice. This book is an invitation for you to join this legacy. We have opportunities to honor it each and every day. In 2019, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute announced it would give a Human Rights Award to scholar and activist Angela Davis. Consistent with her lifelong commitment to struggles for justice, Davis is a vocal supporter of justice for Palestinians. Zionists seized upon this to falsely paint Davis as an anti-Semite and pressure the Institute to take the award back. I felt utterly sickened at this celebration of one of our beloved visionaries, ever committed to building a better world for all, devolved into an attempt to tear our communities apart. Davis grew up in a neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama, that faced such incessant white terrorist attacks that it became known as Dynamite Hill. Days after the 2018 Pittsburgh massacre and murder of 2 Black people at a grocery store in Jeffersontown, Kentucky, I saw Davis speak in New York City. She connected the events. Davis shared how intertwined white supremacist violence against Black communities like her own has always been to white supremacist violence against Jewish communities like my Aunt Jerry's. Anti-Semitism and racism are historically linked, Davis said, just 6 blocks from the progressive Jewish high school she attended, in credits for influencing her activism. Calling up one unleashes the other. Davis traveled to Palestine in 2011 with a group of indigenous and women of color feminists brought together by Palestinian scholar and activist Rabab Abdulhadi. I heard them report back on their experience at a feminist conference in Atlanta. In the carpeted convention center hallway after the panel, Davis told me that her Jewish classmates at Brandeis were the first ones to welcome her into the movement for justice for Palestinians. Each of these stories swirled in my head as I sat on my friend Sarah's couch one evening, savoring her unrivaled home cooking. I felt deeply upset about the attempt to smear and discredit someone who'd always stood up against oppression of all kinds. I decided then we had to intervene. Just as movements came together to support Davis when the FBI pursued her 50 years prior, so too would we support Davis in a moment when she was under attack. Honoring the legacy of those before us, I set wood type on an old press bed, inked up the roller, and cranked the handle. I printed up a poster. Angela, you are welcome at this Shabbat. My friend Elena introduced me to Amira, a Palestinian in New Orleans. Amira introduced me to Jesse, a Jew in Birmingham. Refusing the media narratives that tried to pit our communities against one another, Amira, Jesse, and I worked together to organize 50 Shabbats across the country held in solidarity with Davis as she returned to Alabama for an alternative community celebration. Our efforts, along with those of fellow grassroots organizers, helped compel the Institute to reconsider their decision. The following year, on Juneteenth, as historic Black Lives Matter uprisings swelled in the streets in the wake of the police murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute officially honored Angela Davis with the Fred Shuttlesworth Human Rights Award. If I didn't have Sarah, if I didn't have Elena, if I didn't have Amira, if I didn't have Jesse, perhaps this story would have had a different ending. It is in community, as Davis teaches us, in working together with others, that we can build movements that have the power to bring about social change. Know that there is a whole community eager to embrace you with open arms. Whenever they try to knock you down, we will be there to help lift you, to help lift each other right back up again.
Let's have a round of applause for all the contributors to this book, all the readers. Let's hear it for Jenny Romaine, who made the beautiful installation in the entryway. Thank you so much, Jenny. We love you so much. Let's hear it for the Poetry Project. Let's hear it for Wendy Subway, two of our beloved cultural institutions that have endorsed the Palestinian academic and cultural boycott of Israel, as all cultural institutions must do. Please donate to the Palestinian youth movement. Please pick up 5 or 10 copies of the book. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. We will see you in the streets. Thank you, everybody, so much for spending your Mother's Day with us. Thank you.